I could give you five strong arguments.
I'll stop you there because Professor Wajackoyah, there he is arriving because we hadn't expected him until a few moments ago. And Rashid Abdallah is with them. Rashid, kazi kwako.
If we are not four, I'm not attending.
Naam, labda kwa dakika moja tu, maana uko tuona kusubiri na wale ambao wanafuatilia, labda kwa kufika kwako, matarajio yako na msimamo wa mjadala ni upi?
I am not attending unless we are four. That's why I've come to confirm, because this thing is too far. Sorry, because they never responded to my letter. And if the media wants to corrupt the intelligence of this society, if the media wants to run corruption in this country, if the media itself can do what they have done, to hell with them. Where's Mr. Omari?
Na kwa ufupi ni kwamba utafanya mjadala.
I am not going to unless we are four.
Na bila shaka nafikiri umeweza kusikia mtazamaji, kwa hivi sasa ameweza sema ameshafika Profesa George Wajackoyah, yuko tayari kwa mjadala, lakini labda pendekezo lake ni moja tu, kama watakuwa wanne katika kikao hicho ndio wataweza kufanya mjadala. Kwa nafikiri kwamba hivi sasa na fursa ya kuzungumza na wamiliki wa vyombo vya habari kama alivyosema, awasikize, watoe mwelekeo kuhusiana na maombi aliyoyatoa, alafu baadaye atatupa mwelekeo kama atashiriki kama atoshiriki. Kwako Joageo.
All right, shukran. Rashid Abdallah speaking to George Wajackoyah is arrived, and I think we will just continue with what you were saying. Houghton, this is interesting. He's arrived, but you know he's saying there are still conditions.
I think politicians can't give conditions to the media who have no control over the participation of other candidates. I think the responsibility of the media is to provide an equal, fair, open debate for all political candidates to come forward. And I think it's the responsibility of candidates and the humility of candidates to say that they are willing to come before the nation and seek a job that is the highest job in the land. And I think that is where I would start with that.
Okay. Let me go to the other flank. Dennis, what do you make of all this?
No, I think this is important. Debates are important. Debates are important, as I think Irungu has made very good about, has talked a lot about history. I think one of the things that we have a challenge in Kenya with is actually having discussions, exchanging views. So for me, it makes total sense that we have debates, that we have people exchanging views, agreeing to disagree, and basically telling the Kenyans what they're going to do. So I think this is totally important for us.
All right, Sheila?
I agree with my co-panelists. This forum is important. I know that politicians are not used to moderated forums. Yeah. We're used to seeing them in public rallies where they're shouting at us and chiming on. But this is a forum where we expect, and what we have seen in the last 2 weeks is a moderated, very, in a sense, controlled discussion, which enables us to be able to get the gist of what their campaigns are about, what their manifestos and plans are about, and what they really are about, looking at even some of the questions that have been asked around their values and issues around integrity. So it's important because we don't get to get a sense of all this when they're out there in public rallies. So this is an important forum. I know that there's been a lot of investment looking at the sheer infrastructure set up for this debate. So I think it's important that politicians honor this. I know that even at the local level, there are various attempts to bring together members of county assembly, members of parliament, and the reaction on the ground is when one misses a debate that you're really not honoring us. And I think this is the perception that some Kenyans have, although there's also a school of thought that says, by the time people are watching a debate, they've already made up their mind. So it's either to reaffirm their love and admiration for you, or to confirm why they are not going to vote for you in the first place. But all in all, it's an important forum to enable Kenyans to see, get to hear from you in more depth what you're planning to do for Kenya.
Thank you. Yet, Professor Witi, there are people who say, at least if you go by the polls and all the different conversations we've had about this election, that there seems to be an uncharacteristically high number of undecided voters, even as late as a week or two ago. How does that square with the need thereof of a debate such as this one?
Thanks, Joe. I think voters are tuned in, and I'm really sympathetic because this, to me, has been a very arid political season. There is a devastating, blistering drought of great ideas that are required in this transformative moment to move the country forward. And that's the reason why voters have checked out. That's why a lot of people don't feel that the politicians, the four running for president, have articulated anything that is remotely adjacent to the critical issues that are needed to move the country forward. Their manifestos.
How do you mean? I mean, they all have manifestos.
Yeah, the manifestos are a mile wide, but they're not even an inch deep in terms of how they frame the issues. Everybody's got this long list that any Kenyan can spew out. Agriculture, employment, energy, infrastructure, education, but there is nothing substantive that is transformative, which these politicians are saying. Everybody's got a bunch of proposals that are completely unfunded. We have a devastating deficit right now of 862 billion.
So what's missing?
What's missing is a coherent plan that basically addresses the fundamental issues in a transformative way. We're hungry today. When I worked in agriculture many years ago in Western Kenya, 9 out of 12 months, farmers who till the land every single day were hungry. If you look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics census on household food security, it's still the same picture. People in rural areas are more food insecure than urban people who are working. Agriculture is not working. Some of the input supply, input subsidy programs are not working, like fertilizer application rates, for instance, are extremely low. Extension services are broken. So you give farmers fertilizer, they're applying it on soils that are not ready to take fertilizer. So these are some of the fundamental things. So to put more money at this bad problem is the problem. And you see the manifesto that has been advanced by Raila Odinga and William Ruto. It's exactly the same, more of the same. It's not going to change the trajectory that the country has taken so far. And that's why voters have checked out. Basically saying, what's the difference?
Well, at least Wajackoyah has some radical 10 points, and we'll talk about them in a while. But Wanjiru, I wonder what your initial thoughts are about this debate.
It is important, and listening to the concerns that are being brought forward by Wajackoyah, by Honorable Raila Odinga, my question from a public participation point of view is, as the media platform is created, is there usually a discussion with the political actors? Because if there isn't, there could be next time. I think there are a lot of Kenyans there that would have loved to see a debate with all the presidential candidates. So public participation and stakeholder engagement, I think, applies across the board. But given that we're here, I agree totally with what Sheila is saying, that we expect our leaders to be humble enough to avail themselves, to field, to sell their proposals to the public. But I think the missing link, and my question as we engage in this very, this event is it too little too late? Because we have a situation where we have an administration that hasn't undertaken or supported public participation, hasn't supported civic education, hasn't supported voter education. And so even as the media strives to put together this platform, is it too little too late? And how do we ensure accountability? Because it's one thing to have manifestos, and I don't agree quite with the professor. I think the manifestos have some very good proposals that, if implemented, can transform some of the big issues that bedevil us.
But he's saying they are more of the same.
I don't agree with that in terms of substance, but what I do, the question is, where is the accountability? After the promise, how do we ensure implementation? Because we are seeing challenges on leadership and integrity even going into the campaign. We are seeing violations of the basic tenets of the law in the way the political parties have constituted themselves. So the challenge to me is, yes, it's good to have these platforms. We need to have them consistently across the board, not just before the major election, but annually we should have an accountability forum, asking the questions, asking the president.
But I've heard at least the organizers of the debate, say that the culture is picking up. I mean, you look at different neighborhoods, people are hosting candidates for MCA and different groups, whether it's religious groups, whether it is civil society people. There is this demand of the people who are, seeking different offices to come before the people and explain themselves.
It's not just when politicians are seeking votes that they need to field questions, and you know, this debate is questions mainly from the media who represent really good questions, but these questions should come from the ground. And I totally agree that this needs to be part of the culture, and as Sheila said, all the way to the local level. Political leaders need to be answerable to the public through these public forums, but also in other ways that we can ensure accountability, because after the promise, then what? And that could explain the undecided, because as Prof says, as Geshira says, if my issues have not been dealt with, why should I then get involved in this very intense electioneering period? It's more of the same.
Okay, I really want us to go into a bit of the manifestos and what these two gentlemen bring to the table. But I think there's an issue here, a national issue that all of us have seen play out with regard to where we are in terms of the preparations for this election that is now just 13 days away. And we've seen some back and forth between IEBC and DCI, for example. I wonder around this table how that makes us feel, and I'll start with you, Houghton.
Although we're probably not the best people to start with. As Amnesty, we don't do very much in terms of election oversight. But let me just give you a couple of thoughts. One is that, you know, we have to keep in mind that public trust and credibility of institutions at a time like this is just so important. To have two independent institutions, the National Police Service / Director of Criminal Investigations and the Electoral Commission, scrapping in public.
All right, I'm always interrupting you because the other candidate, the Agano presidential candidate, is arriving there, David Wahiga Mwaure, and I'll go straight to Lulu Hassan, who is going to be speaking to him in a short while.
Na barabara kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, shukran sana Joe Ageyo. Kama mnavyoona tayari David Wahiga Mwaure tayari kishawasili wa chama cha Agano akiwa na mgombea mwenza.
All right, that does seem that we're having a bit of a signal problem there, but yes, the gentleman you just saw there is the Agano presidential candidate, that is David Wahiga Mwaure, who is going to be taking part in this debate. And I just want to continue with that, getting some quick thoughts around this whole thing of what's really happening with the IBC. And I think maybe I go to Dennis.
I don't know. I've always been worried about IBC preparedness. There are no good signs. We're not seeing good signs. I don't want to be dramatic, but I wonder what these good signs mean in terms of the fate of the election itself, because it seems to be going worse. 2013, we were here. 2017, it got worse. Now we're 2022, it's even worse. It's just not prepared. And I'm
but what's really the problem, according to you?
From a technical perspective, I think there's a way in which organization is not being done. The procurement is not being done well. We don't have the audit report from KPMG. We're not sure about ballot papers. Ballot papers are coming before gazette notices are issued.
Okay, Dennis, I'm sorry. We have to go back, and I think we are now ready with the Agano presidential candidate, Wahiga Mwaure.
Na barabara kabisa, mtazamaji, kama mnavyoona David Wahiga Mwaure tayari wa Agano Party kisha wasili kwa mjadala ambao umesubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu. Labda nimuulize mawili matatu kuhusiana na mjadala wa siku hii ya leo. Karibu sana David.
Asante sana dadangu.
Naam, umejitayarisha vipi siku hii ya leo?
Nimejitayarisha kabisa ili nikuje niwaeleze wa Kenya sababu gani ni lazima safari tubadilishe na sababu gani ni lazima wachague mtu mpya na yeye ndiye mimi. Tunakuja kuelewa kwamba hii ni miaka 59 kutoka wakati tulipata uhuru. Tumekuwa na tabu nyingi hata baada ya miaka hiyo yote. Na sisi wengine kama mimi nimeingia katika huu uchaguzi kwa sababu naamini ni wakati wa kufagia na kuleta wapya. Na kwamba kila ndoto ya yeyote, hata wewe ambaye huja kuwemo huku ndani, hujulikani, hujuna pesa nyingi ama mahelikopta, unaweza kuwa rais kama vile dada yetu Rupita alivyotuambia kila ndoto ni valid.
Na unahisi vipi kuhusiana na mjadala wetu siku hii leo? Unahisi vipi? Hisia zako ni gani?
Mimi kwanza nina furaha kwa sababu ni haki ya Wakenya kutusikia zote. Na natarajia hata kukutana na mgombea yule mwingine, my competitor, na hata wale wengine nawaambia wakuje ili Wakenya waelewe. Na mimi kile ninayofurahia ni ya kwamba yale tumekuwa tukiona kule nje, wakati mwingine hata watu hawasikizi sera ni gani. Wanaangalia magari, wanaangalia vipi mapambo, lakini leo ni wakati wa kusikiza hasa ni nani anaweza akabadilisha maisha yako.
Okay, shukran sana.
Asante na shukuru.
Okay. Ndio hivyo tumeweza kumsikia David Wahiga Mwaure akisema kwamba ataeleza sera zake kwa upana zaidi, akitumai kwamba yule mgombea mwenzake ambaye ni mpinzani wake Wajackoyah atakuwa yuko naye katika jukwaa lile. Ni mambo ambayo tunasubiri kuona, mtazamaji, lakini kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja na kurudisha kwake Joa Geyo, endelee na wachanganuzi.
Shukran, Lulu Hassan. So the Ghana presidential candidate is in the house, and we will have to wait for that because the two platforms couldn't be more different. But we were talking about the IEBC preparedness and the back and forth we are seeing with the DCI. Dennis, I don't know if you had finished your thoughts.
No, for me, it's not the management problem. I think IEBC now presents for us a political and an economic risk.
Wow, that is big. What are you talking about?
It is. The uncertainty behind all these preparations, it's no longer about management and procurement. We're now talking about, are we going to have an election? Are we going to have an election that is successfully executed? Are we going to have an election that is not disputed? These are now political and economic risks. I think that's where we are.
Prof?
So, you know, Joe, this is a historical problem. This is not just IEBC. The previous electoral bodies have had these same levels of institutionalized and government engineering competence because of what elections mean to our governance process. We've not had free and fair elections since 1992. This is not a disputable fact. I think the only credible election we had that we believe the outcome was 2002. So what IBC exhibits today is a comedy of errors in many respects and institutional incompetence at a colossal, catastrophic level. One scholar of governance called Land Pritchard talks about governance in capability and talks about isomorphic mimicry, where we've created an institution that mimics that which should be a functional institution that runs election. In every sense it looks like, but it doesn't function like one. So I think that in many respects, if you look at the last 4 elections, we've created a system where IBC is kind of an arm of government that inserts itself in diverting and subverting the will of the people. Now that has created interesting opportunities for perpetrating internal incompetence in the sense that IBC is just not well organized as an institution with all the capabilities that it needs to run an election. Internally, we talk about procurement issues. We talk about just an election, a plan of action that you would execute to the D-Day of an election. If you ask Chebukati what he's been doing for the last 3 years in preparation for this election, you know, the voter register, the cleaning up of all of that, talking about electoral materials, the ballot papers, the security around that. And as Dennis says, this is an existential risk to the democracy. And it's also a threat to the body polity of the country in terms of our sovereignty in many respects.
Sheila, how worried are you about this situation?
Well, the trust deficit levels have always been low for our election management bodies and largely partly because of how some processes are conducted. Key among them is procurement of key strategic materials.
That must be something you follow keenly.
Yeah, we follow. Yes, we follow that keenly. And one of the things that we had urged IBC earlier on is in the spirit of open procurement, because we know the problem of procurement in this country. It is actually the center of corruption. Most corruption in this country emanates from public procurement. And so the interest that then the procurement of these strategic materials, the ballot papers, the technology has, it meant that there needed to be an attempt to ensure that there was open communication throughout, because when you're looking at some of the claims that were made, was it 4 weeks, 3 weeks ago, coming from politicians, it comes from that whole organization of procurement. So my own take is that there should have been an attempt to be a bit more open, not a bit more, but actually very open in terms of communication, communicating with stakeholders, including the political class. But the other concern that I have is just the ability of our agencies to be able to work together. When you see that kind of spat between the police and IBC, and you wonder whether these are not some things that could have been resolved, you know, bilaterally. Yeah, we expect them to work together. An election, it requires that you're working very closely with security agencies. And I would have expected that that kind of, whether it's a misunderstanding or a dispute or whatever contention, should have been sort out, especially because we know how we easily sensationalize things around elections and politics, especially at this time. We're just 2 weeks to the elections. I would have expected that as a matter of national security, this is something that should have been handled. Of course, of course, it's good that it's out in the open, so we know what issues are there, but then we also know that this is something that can potentially, spark several disputes, in regard to the election. And of course, I know the politicians are watching. It's probably a matter, if anyone is preparing the petition, it's already something there.
They are doing more than they're watching. They're talking a lot as well.
But, so my concern, Joe, is how our institutions are working, not just the police and IBC, but throughout the planning of this entire election. I have had my concerns in terms of our institutions to be able to work in collaboration. Even when you look at how candidates were verified, vetted, and cleared, you could tell that clearly these institutions were not working together, and as a result of that, we now have people who are not credible, who don't meet the qualifications set out in the Constitution, who have been cleared for office. So this problem started earlier on in the election process.
Wow. It all sounds familiar, Wanjiru. Deja vu all over again?
Unfortunately, yes. This is a political problem because the IBC is really, if you look at our democratic trajectory as Irungu was taking us, from the very start, we are trying to build a constitutional democracy, and we are trying to ensure that our governance is guided by the rule of law. That is where we are heading, and we are coming from a context where we had, an authoritarian, very corrupt regime through the 80s, through the 90s, and we are trying to reform this with the Constitution of Kenya. And the IBC continues to be possibly our weakest link in our democratic process. And I would say this is a political problem, because the IBC was not fully constituted until very recently.
Last year, yes.
Until last year. And that was a failure on the part of, you would say, it's the political leadership. It's the government of the day, you would say, because having the majority of numbers in the House, having even through the handshake, the government, the administration had the wherewithal to be able to constitute IBC adequately. Another factor with IBC we continue to hear is the budget. That they do not get the allocations they need in terms of the budget. We also know there's a lot of horse trading and a lot of efforts to kind of influence. Of course, the way the IBC is designed, political parties have a role in terms of the nominations of the constitution of the commissioners, but we then don't see the independence, and we get a sense there's a lot of interference happening behind the scenes. So the inability of IBC to win the public trust, and the fear that it may, not perform to the level that's needed, is a political problem. And then we ask ourselves, we've had several by-elections run by the very IBC, and we now see, as the stakes get very high, this IBC is not able to, the institutions aren't working together.
All right, we need to go. I think yes, there is. That is Professor Wajackoyah, the Roots presidential candidate. I'm not quite sure what he wants to say, but there he is outside. We'll just take you there and hear what he's talking about. All right, so we will keep that there as we monitor what that is about. But here with my panel, we are monitoring this together. And Prof, I see you are quite perplexed, perhaps amused by what's going on.
No, Dennis just remarked that Wajackoyah is probably standing next to his lawyer, so I'm wondering whether he's going to sue the organizers of the presidential debate.
So we have to be careful what we say here, but we have to monitor what that's about as we continue. But I want us to talk a little bit about these two gentlemen and what they have placed on the table. And it is interesting, we're watching Wajackoyah just now. And he has this thing that he calls a 10-point manifesto that has all kinds of things there. There is cannabis that has taken the country by storm, the whole conversation, and he has some people call it ganjanomics because he has all these figures around it, and he has things like hanging the corrupt, he has things like shutting down the SGR, suspending the constitution, and selling all manner of body parts of hyenas and related things. I wonder what the thinking is, first overall, what his approach has been, Dennis, to this campaign, Professor Wajackoyah.
I think for me, actually looking at all the manifestos, I think for me, what he's doing is he's saying, think out of the box. Let's think out of the box.
Some people say he's throwing out the box.
Some people say he's throwing out the box. I think he's, but in a way, and I think I've seen one comment about this, he's saying, let's think about ourselves on a journey to self-reliance. So all these ideas he has, hyenas and snakes and so on, they're all about generating revenue. It's about self-reliance. So for me, that is his message. And I think it's a sensible message. It has radical ideas, but it's a sensible message.
But Professor Witty, you say you haven't seen anything radical.
Well, you know, and again, going back to that part about the manifestos, it's not saying that the manifestos don't exist. The question is how thoughtful and how realistic are these propositions? We've seen two cycles of truly memorable manifestos, 2013, 2017. We saw President Kenyatta run in 2017, and actually just throw away the 2013 manifesto, not even make any references to it in terms of continuity. And we've seen him govern from 2017 to now, not even paying attention to any of the ideas that he put forth there. So I think sometimes I just tend to think that they're not even worth the paper they're written on, to the extent that there's no real commitment by these people and there's no way to hold them accountable. And again, set aside the manifestos. There is a government fiscal plan. There's so many constraints to basically executing government. I don't even know, in more developed democracies, there is a very deep conversation between the presidential candidates and the public service. Treasury, for instance, the key officers that run the bureaucracy in education, for instance, in agriculture, to basically understand what is it that we've been doing. Some of these manifestos read like this country does not even exist, that there is nothing. And these guys are basically reinventing the wheel. And that's what concerns me. But I think for Wajackoyah, there's only one point that I wish the country could pay attention to in his manifesto. I think it's the 8th or 9th one, which talks about reducing the number of devolved units to 8.
Yes.
I think that to me is a very, very sensible proposition.
Yeah.
Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen and fellow citizens, devolution is a millstone on our necks. It is a very expensive enterprise. It is the most expensive way to do what we're trying to do.
And we will talk about it.
And it is totally unaccountable. It is expensive in the way that the money has been spent. And we don't even see it. Go to the counties and see the money is in recurrent expenditure. You could spend the money in different ways. Now, the biggest problem is holding the governors accountable. The county assemblies don't hold them accountable. So you can take the money, spend the money in a different way, and get real results for the citizens.
Now, what, you don't agree?
Tom, I think we live in two different Kenyas, because this notion that counties are a drain on the budget was created by the Jubilee administration, which was essentially a voted no to the constitution, no to devolution, and refused and failed to transfer resources to the county. They transferred the minimum. At present, with a higher allocation to counties, you're talking about something like 332 billion to counties against a budget of 2.7 trillion. So how is devolution the drain on the neck of the country? The other thing around devolution is, if you look at the extent to which counties have been able to improve agriculture, for instance, during 2020, when the country stopped, agriculture was the only function that continued to sustain the economy of Kenya. Now, these are facts, these are statistics, that it was the one sector that continued to hold up the GDP of the country.
So devolution is a political exercise because it brings power closer to the people, and it also helps in the distribution of resources because Kenya is very unequal. The challenge with devolution is accountability, like you say, but accountability cuts across the board.
But isn't it, Wanjiru, I mean, what I see is where Wajackoyah is saying that we just reduce the number.
Well, the issue is, don't talk about units, let's talk about representation, because devolution is about...
two different issues.
No, the purpose of devolution, okay, one, Kenya is unequal, so none of us here will disagree that we have to distribute resources equitably. So you have to have an equitable share. But then the other side of that is, where do citizens decide? And how far away do you want the decision to be from the farthest corner of Kenya? So the issue is with whether we have 47 counties, we now have the regional economic blocks that allow these counties to come together and then come up with, the economies of scale and the efficiency. So let us not deny Kenyans the ability to elect their MCA and hold their MCA to account at a level that is close enough, because we've had enough of centralized government. We want more decentralized government, but we want accountable centralized government. So I think on that, devolution is not just about economics. It has assisted economics. If you look at even the increase in property prices, the expansion of services, devolution has assisted that. But there is also a political exercise, and there is Article 1, citizens say, self-governance. You can't have that under centralized government.
Joe, let me just jump in, because every time I jump in,
It's a debate.
All right, just very briefly, yes, yeah. We just want to do a check on what's happening with the registration, but it's fine. You can make that come.
Okay, so that was the light touch. I mean, I think the thing that we have seen in both of their manifestos, which I think have been interesting, is the focus on anti-corruption, right? So that's the area that they do agree on, but their prescriptions are very different. So I think with the Agano Party, what I saw was a lot of language around, how painful, how onerous, corruption and impunity is, but very few legislative and policy prescriptions and, I guess, programmatic shifts, right? The one thing that I think is interesting there is this idea of shifting prosecutorial powers to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yeah. So we will come and have a fuller conversation on this. I just want to remind our viewers who are watching this all across the screens in this country. We are live on TV and even online, following these historic engagements that we have in this country every election cycle. And right now, many people are already arriving here, the audience being properly vetted. And I want to cross live to Kennedy Mureithi, who is standing at our registration desk, just to check what's happening there. Is everybody in now? Because we'll be starting this debate in another 45 minutes or so. Kennedy, what's happening where you are?
Well, thank you, Joe, and quite an interesting panel you're having there, discussion. And here on this other side of the registration desk, there is an outpouring of Kenyans who want to watch this live, and they are already being cleared from the registration. There are hundreds of others that are being cleared from the other side where there is the main gate as they come in, and there is also a provision for where they will be sitting as they wait for them to be called on. And there is a serious number of officers who are doing this particular job as they wait to clear everybody that is coming in. But we are having their head, Madam Doris Tanui, on this side, just to give us a glimpse of what is happening and who are you clearing. Are you giving an opportunity for those people who are coming here for the first time, or it is by invite?
We are giving those who have been invited. You come here with an invitation card, and once you get here with your invitation card, we'll give you a QR card to scan with your phone, and then immediately it will tell you to register. Once you register, it syncs into our system. From there, we can be able to print these accreditation cards for them.
So when you're saying that you're coming in and you're given a QR code, does that mean that anybody else who has not received an invitation card from home will come here and receive the QR code?
No, if you have not been given an invitation card, we are not able to print for you a badge, and you cannot be allowed inside the gate.
So probably take us through this process. We are seeing that there are different desks manned by different people. Is it to cater for the different groups that have been invited? As I can see here, my camera person Brian will be showing there is the embassies, there is the Media Owners Association and all that. Then there is the delegates. Probably you could take us through this.
Yeah, from that side, we are able to handle the embassies, we are able to handle the diplomats, and then from these desks, we are accrediting everyone. People come, they sit from that side, then they will be called one by one. They go to various desks, and then they are sorted out to make it move faster.
Well, that is what we are getting, and everybody has been catered for when they make their way to this particular place. And we will, the digital?
This company is called Digital One. We are the one who are doing registration and accreditation.
Yes.
Yes.
And we have already seen an outpouring of people that started early in the morning as they came in. Remember, this auditorium houses about 700 people who will be coming in, and they will be watching from here. But we're also having the security team that is being manned to make sure that everybody who comes here has been vetted, and will be making sure that they come with that particular card, the invitation card that they were given, so as to make sure that the security is smoothless. Hello, madam.
Jambo wa Kenya, jambo wageni. Hapa ni sub-county ya Lang'ata, na huyu ni kamanda mkuu wa polisi eneo hili la Lang'ata, Miss Monica Kimani, na nataka kuambia mambo ya usalama. Tumeweka usalama ambao ni zuri sana. Kuna sehemu 4 za ukaguzi, kuna main gate, kuna hapa mahali mnaona registrations, kuna pale chini na kwenye auditorium. Kwa hivyo security ni nzuri sana, na tunaomba delegates wale wamealikwa wawe very cooperative kwa sababu ya usalama wao na usalama wa wageni pia ambao tuko na wao kwa wingi.
Well, you're talking about the security that has been enhanced. Probably you will tell us the number of people that are coming in, and the number of security officers that you've placed here, just to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. We have over 100 police officers within this compound, and many others outside this compound. We have both in civics and in uniform, and so there is no reason to get worried. We are up to the task.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Just before I get back to you, we'll also want to get a view from one of the delegates who have come here. As we do know that there are those delegates that are also representing the political parties that are involved in this debate. There are those supporters that have come with the 4 presidential candidates that we do expect will be involved in today's debate. We would want to get probably a view from one of them. How are you, sir?
I'm very fine.
What is your name, and today you're here, and how is the feeling, and why not watch from home and come here today?
Basically, my name is Samuel Gutu. Basically, I want to say I'm one of the few delegates that are privileged to come and have a one-on-one interaction with the presidential candidates. I'm here basically to hear them out, to hear their agenda, and probably make an informed decision come 9th of August during the elections.
Thank you, Joe. Those are some of the expectations that most of the people are having today, as they hope that today, when these candidates go on the floor, they will make their submissions, and with those moderators that we are having, will be able to interrogate some of these positions that they have put out there, and that decision probably will be made. There is a huge number of undecided Kenyans that are yet to make their decision, and there are those that will be willing to cement their positions today when these debates go on. Right now, I take it back to you, Joe, to continue with your panel discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Kennedy Morezi. They are speaking to various people involved in the registration. We've seen security people there, We've even seen some of the delegates who are arriving, and that is to say that the debate is just minutes away now. At 5:30, that's when the first debate kicks off between Professor George Wajackoyah. We've seen him here already. That is of the Roots Party, and the Ghana presidential candidate David Wahiga Mwaure. And I have my panel here. They are still here. They haven't left. And as we were talking, there was a whole conversation about Wajackoyah and his federal system sort of proposal. And then there was a bit of fireworks flying here. I was almost getting my helmet, but still I heard you making a sound likely to suggest you wanted to say something.
Yes, you had me right, Joe.
Yes.
On the issue of Wajackoyah's proposals on devolution, I agree with Wanjiru in regard to caution in terms of how we deal with the issue of devolution, but particularly because for me the wastage is across all levels. It's both at the national level and also at the county level, and obviously there's a question around accountability that
some people say we devolved all the bad manners to.
Yes, we did. We did devolve corruption. We had warned about that many years before the county governments were formed in 2013, and I think we focused a lot on at the national level, even when you look at our institutions responsible for addressing and oversighting in regard to accountability, they're focused at the national level. And I go back to the question around resourcing for our institutions which are responsible for oversight. And we talked about this when we're talking about IBC, but it's not just IBC. When you go to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the ODPP, the judiciary as well, which is responsible for, is at the last point of the criminal justice chain in terms of listening and hearing and determining, adjudicating corruption cases, they do not have adequate resources to be able to fully perform their mandate to our satisfaction. And you can see that the problem of corruption is quite huge. I think right now as we speak, we are experiencing the highest cost of corruption. But we have not matched our institutions to the resources that are required. But if I can also just speak to the issues around what these candidates have in their manifestos in regard to addressing corruption. Yeah. Wajackoyah talks about the death penalty.
Yes, hanging people.
Yes, I'm a bit cautious on this because we also know that we're in a country which respects the right to life. Life is, when you look at our constitution and our laws, and for me, I've always questioned that, okay, I've seen other countries which do this, but then in that case, you're not really, we want those people alive to get the real punishment in prison. I want the person who was recently was it 2 years ago, someone was sentenced to 67 years in prison. I want them to spend 67 years in prison.
Well, it's running
to
for
see
election,
the pain
but that's a story for another day.
That's a story for here. We'll talk about it as well, because we need to hold our leaders accountable for these people who are coming to debate here and telling us that they are fighting corruption, but they are still giving tickets to people responsible for corruption, and then you tell us that you want to fight corruption with people who have been responsible for corruption. Those are the things we need to call out some of these people for. But so I question Wajackoyah's proposal on this. And then for Mwaure, you've seen that as you've said, his emphasis is on recovery of assets, which is important because I've not seen people talking about monies that we have lost, billions of shillings stashed out there in foreign countries. I saw that you already wrote a letter to some foreign governments asking for support in terms of, tracing and repatriating that money back into our economy. This is important. Not very many people are talking about this because we are struggling as a country with our economy, inflation, and we really this is a time we need all those resources that have been stashed out there to be brought back to be able to, bolster our economy. So I agree with him on that. He's also talked about revisiting some long-lasting corruption cases, KEMSA, the Kendren and NYS and others which have not been resolved. I think this is important. Just be cautious as well.
There's always
cautious because even as president, we also expect that he will respect independent institutions.
Exactly, because
the institutions responsible for investigation.
That's where I was going
and prosecution.
With that. How viable then is it for a candidate to really come and tell us this is what I'm going to do about corruption. I mean, in the face of what you're talking about, because we have the EACC, we have the DCI, all of this DPP, everybody doing their bit within this whole chain. What is the president going to do? I mean, the current president famously said, some people now say infamously, munataka nifanye nini jameni?
Well, there's a role that the executive also has to play. That is important, you know, even in terms of, because one of the things that we have struggled in this country is political will, you know, and even just, you know, how are you able to call out your people in government, your colleagues in government who are responsible for corruption? One of the promises of the Jubilee administration 10 years ago was that they would ensure that people who have been indicted for corruption do not hold public office. But then how many people have we seen continue in public office even after being indicted?
Okay,
so those are some of the things that we see. So it's a political will that is really critical that we need to see coming from the presidency. And there are many other roles that the presidency plays in terms of fighting corruption without necessarily going into the mandate and influencing independent institutions.
Then is there are platforms here. So they are gone. For Wajackoyah, the most outstanding thing about fighting corruption is, of course, kunyonga hao, which Sheila has a more complicated name for the death penalty or capital and whatever, but it's really kunyonga watu, isn't it?
With him. He said he's going to hang them with him.
Yes, but then there are the other things that the Ghana presidential candidate is proposing, such as the whole asset recovery thing. In fact, he's saying that asset recovery thing should be domiciled in the presidency. He's already written some letters to some foreign embassies and that sort of thing. He's talking about devolving budgeting to village councils, which is not just about corruption, but I guess it's also some of the things that Wanjiru was talking about, taking everything closer to the people. And then talking about the big fish going about.
Budgeting at the national level or at the county level?
At the village.
Devolving it beyond cascading it further to the villages.
So that is devolve funds going to the villages to make budget proposals about their priorities.
Yeah,
like they do in makwiny.
Yeah,
That's how they do
because
their
his
budgeting.
proposal on one of the proposals, at least on devolution, is that the allocation to the counties will be 40%. Right now, of course, there's a whole debate whether it is even 15 or 12 or 10. We really don't know many times, but he's saying he's going to make it 40, and 10 out of the 40 is going to go directly to this this village councils that he's talking about.
It's easier said than done, because you see, we already have the sub-units within counties, the sub-counties. And in the current constitution, and what has not been instituted, has been the further devolution below the county level to the sub-counties and below, where you'd go to a ward, for instance, and then have a ward council or a ward forum that basically talks about those priorities. But that envelope has to be allocated by the county assembly. That is the process. There has to be a legislative process that basically looks at the entire pie and then further allocates that, and then at that sub-county, sub-ward level, then you can now talk about ward priorities. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes very unwieldy. And then what is the level of preparedness, preparation, training, capacity building for villagers to be able to do this? I think sometimes we need to be very careful of this fantastical thinking, because this is serious stuff.
But it's happening. It's happening. And sorry to jump in. When we talk about decentralization of the budgeting process, it's happened in Makwiny. And there are models that we can look at, such as Makwiny, where budgeting process starts at the, in fact, sub-village in terms of prioritization. And they then have a process of, putting together those proposals. And then at the ward level, you have ward kind of budgeting meetings. So if the governor wants to do a county-wide large infrastructure project, like national government did SGR, or they want to build a hospital or something, they have to go to these ward level meetings and convince villagers, give us this priority because it will help you. So you have a deliberative budgeting process that is well thought out, that is based on structures that are not just set up for the budgeting process, but that exist and have other roles. Linked to that,
before
but isn't there a need for that continuous capacity building for them?
They have a whole, exactly. It's political will.
Not the numbers like how many shillings and cents you're going to spend on a bridge.
No, it is. By the way, the budget discussion is based on the proposals because there is a problem in Kenya's budgeting process, and we've been told this by government, by people in fact in finance, where we do budgeting based on expenditure proposals without the estimates. The estimates are supposed to go together with these proposals, and that's how you wind up then having fantastical projects that then can't be financed.
And I want Dennis to come in because he's been waiting to do that for a while.
I have a serious problem asking people to solve problems. The whole point of this whole budget process is that we go to Kenyans and we say, what are the issues that are facing you? Then, because we are responsible government, we solve them through policy. Yeah? We don't let people design projects. We solve them through policy, which is then translated to programs, which is policy, which I think this is what Alex is saying here, right? We need to get this understanding of government proper, that people tell us what the issues are, we translate those into policy, then policy goes into programs and projects.
Budgets.
People and then budgets. That is the correct order of things. We've mixed it up.
In a bottom-up, in a top-down, in
a holistic.
Top-down economics has not worked.
In a holistic way.
Top-down economics has not worked.
Kenya
has very high inequality.
No, this is not about bottom-up or top-down.
It is not top-down. It is not top-down because the point really is.
Let Dennis finish.
Is that in a consultative participatory process, the communities generate the issues, the priorities. Now, those have to be consistent with the plans.
We looked at the Bolivia system. They have a two-track system. They have a policy system and they have a project prioritization system. And you set up the process so that you can balance the issue that you're raising. But the point is, you do not have public participation, and then government or politicians come and torpedo the wishes of the public.
Houghton had a question. Perhaps we can listen.
I have a comment. I think, having been in a number of county-level conversations in my own community, one of the things that I really find frustrating is that we are asked, what do you want? And then you get a laundry list, right?
Exactly.
Now, what people don't tell you is what is available in the budget envelope. Because ultimately, budget making and policy making is trade-offs of choices. If you're not given the information, how do you participate in the trade of those decisions? What ends up happening is a group of policy makers or budget makers sitting somewhere in a very small room, very far from the rest of the public, make the decisions. We are essentially providing just the fodder, but the actual processing is done by somebody else. I think until we get to a point where we actually have people being able to work out what is the budget for the Kilimani ward, what is the budget for the Nairobi County, and actually start there. What do we want to provide? Let us make the choices and then have the budget makers essentially formulate the budgets so that essentially we can hold them accountable to that. That's the problem.
Wow. Dennis, had you finished?
No, I think that's exactly it. I think the point is this, that, and in fact I'll agree with Wanjiru on one thing and disagree with Alex. This is why devolution is important. Devolution is important because we are now starting to realize that the most important person for me is my guy at the ward.
Yeah, the MCA.
My MCA. Then maybe my MP, maybe my governor, and actually this thing we're sitting about doing here is the last one. Let's be honest. Yeah? I'm more interested in my
But we get it. I mean, many people would say that
Dennis, don't get me wrong.
The stakes usually appear higher up here. That's why people fight and kill and
at a political level, I think devolution is important, and this is why this bottom-up thing works at a political level. But our devolution is still, I think what Alex is saying, economically inefficient.
Yeah, so I'm not against devolution.
It's economically inefficient
what I'm
at the
saying
moment.
is that the architecture of the devolved structures is problematic. We need to think about how we do this, because there are many ways, as they say, to skin a cat. We've chosen the most expensive way to do it, and it is hemorrhaging public resources. A lot of that money is wasted.
Substantiate the hemorrhage.
Let me give you a very clear example. I once sat on a plane with a governor to Hong Kong, and he told me that he could run his county with 50% of the resource they receives. He gave me an example of his MCAs going to Kisumu to write on a 3-day retreat, to write him half a page of a memo. I'm just giving you some examples. And he also told me...
But you see... No,
let Alex finish.
Just give me a minute. So that is a live... And the governor is a second-term governor. He's going to leave. And he told me that this is a shared perspective by many of his colleagues, that the process of checks and balances and accountability are still very weak in the current phase of the regime of implementing devolution. Now, what I'm talking about is we need to strengthen that. I'm not against devolution. I'm really for more money to devolution. What I'm saying is that we just need to be very careful that it is still very early days and we need to strengthen those structures of accountability, but also the execution capacity within the counties. A case in point is that you have a CEC and one chief officer to run agriculture, no extension support.
But then how will you get capacity without resources?
No,
because
that's what I'm saying. We just
you.
need to go back and think hard about the architecture of the devolution. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I just a small point, and I apologize for, we have even moved off maybe the other issues, but the point is with devolution, I agree with you in terms of there's been a lot of waste. That money that is being wasted by the MCAs should go into service delivery. Now that is the same case replicated at the national level, whereby we are saying devolution is not the problem. Our problem is the lack of accountability by our political leaders. So back to the question.
That's what I've been saying.
The question
I'm not saying it's a problem.
So in fact, we're in agreement. We need more money to counties. We need it to be accountable at the county level and also at the national level. And that is the big question. How do we solve that? Because we're looking at some of the impacts of devolution. Right now, we have a drought. I think the worst drought in 40 years. And I was given some figures by my colleagues from Oxfam, and they were reminding us, they told me, say this, 4.2 million Kenyans are facing starvation in Kenya. I mean, we readily forget that when we are not on the front line. 90% of open water sources are drying up. They've got maybe 2 or 3 months of water left. That's the magnitude of the crisis. Juxtapose that with the waste, because the figures that we've lost through corruption are estimated from 700 billion to 1.2 trillion per year in terms of waste. So the issue of accountability or corruption has to be measured in terms of the cost on human life. When you have KEMSA, we lost 7.8 billion during COVID. How do you steal money that we borrowed to help people in the midst of a pandemic? So I think the problem we have is we get lost in the technical and we forget our politicians do this because they can. And it's our politicians and it's some people in levels of government where they're able to subvert our budget processes to enrich themselves at the expense of Kenyans who are losing their lives because of corruption. And that is the issue.
Okay. Let's move on to something that I've seen a lot of politicians talk about, which is the whole thing of the gender question, the 2/3 and all of that. And one of the proposals from Agano is perhaps not too detailed, but talking about implementing it in appointive positions, ensuring that happens, but also enhancing access to government procurement opportunities, reservation to youth, women, persons living with disability to 40%. I think it's currently 30%. I was asking Wanjiru, I think, before we started here, whether this whole idea of gender and the 2/3 question that has dogged our constitutional implementation for 10 years now is an election issue in 2022. And Sheila, you go first.
They've tried to pretend that it is an election issue, I think, because they have...
I like your choice of
word, that's true, because at the front of it, we've had one... I think it's Kenya Kwanza, which says that half of the appointments will go to cabinet. Half of the appointments in cabinet will go to women.
Yes.
But then I already look at it from the optics, like when you're out there, who's around you. That messaging should start from now. Who's around you? Very few women, already occupying those high places within that particular lands. But it's not just that. As you know well, they have nominated a woman for the running mate position. But then for me, it's more or less about optics, because when you looked at the party lists, you remember the party lists that IBC, did not allow and said that parties needed to resubmit new lists. If they couldn't even present us enough women as required as per the constitutional threshold during the listing of people to be nominated, do we really trust that they will then offer those appointive positions? Because for me, it's really promises. But I don't think that the gender issue has been a strong matter that we have really canvassed during this campaign season. We've not given it enough attention. And just one thing, because you've talked about it, on the issue of what Mwaure proposes in terms of procurement and ensuring that women and youth get enough opportunities. From our own experience, we know that many times when those companies that are given contracts and have women and youth, it's basically just on paper. The beneficial owners of those companies are actually not the women and youth. Those are just fronts. So we also need to ensure that actually the beneficial ownership of these companies is made up of women and youth. So there's something else that we need to do to ensure that these opportunities are really going to the people who are more deserving of them.
Houghton, I wonder what your thoughts are about this gender question. I remember when you came and found me here, and you were wondering whether
I was about
we're going to be a manel, yeah?
No, I was about to stage a protest. It was only a manel, right? So fortunately, we have two very, very articulate women on the panel, as well as the three articulate, somewhat articulate men. So I think there are a number of issues. I think the political representation of women is critical, right? And it is not even a matter for debate. It is a constitutional threshold that we must meet. The fact of the matter is we're not going to meet it in this election. So I think there is a crisis coming up the other side of the election. The second issue relates to the use of public resources. And I think the point about procurement is an important one. We look forward to hearing more from the two candidates this morning, this evening. But I think the other issue that I think is really important is making sure that we don't just have women, but we have women with a gendered agenda for this country, right? And we need men with a gendered agenda. So I think we should be asking presidential candidates who are male, what is their gendered perspective about these issues? Let me just give you three very quick ones. We learned last week 5,400 women and girls were raped in the county of Nairobi. What's the agenda to deal with that issue? We have heard that we have one of the highest teenage pregnancies, and the numbers are coming down to like the 10, 11, 12-year-olds, not the preteens, not even the teenagers, but really this very fragile age group. What is our strategy for that? Must we continue to have this sense of denialism around the issue of safe abortion, comprehensive sex education? When are we going to start dealing with the realities that our children are dealing with in a way in which we are not confusing science with our morality? And I think that's the challenge that is forward on the gender issues. I think the very last one for me is this issue around, gender parity, because I think we have to look at this from a really sober perspective. It is estimated that we will not achieve gender parity at these current rates until 2069. That is another 40 years from now plus, will we see women's earnings and men's earnings being similar. At the moment, there is a 23% difference between men and women.
Oh, wow. Wanjiru,
what can I add?
You've been speaking quite a bit, but let's talk about this gender question.
Yes, from a gender perspective and from an inclusion perspective. Yes, I think I totally agree, and thanks so much, Irungu, for reminding us how expansive this is. And what I'll add is maybe just two quick points, is that at the county assembly level, if political parties do not achieve the gender balance, they will then do a top-up. And that top-up because the county assemblies must have a 2/3 representation. And the top-up of additional members means that the taxpayer pays more and that the size of the county assemblies are bloated. So there's a game that political parties play where they field as many male candidates as they can, and were it not for the IBC racking their knuckles in terms of the nomination list, it would even be worse. So one, the failure to respect the rule of law and the failure to embrace the gender agenda and paying lip service to it costs us in economic terms. The second is we did a study on AgPo, and we found that much as you have preferential procurement for youth, women, and persons with disabilities, the thresholds, of course, are not being met by any stretch. But we also found cases where, numerous cases where women were saying they have to give sexual favors. They're being extorted in terms of sexual favors to be able to get the contracts, to be able to get the credit financing that they need. So as Irongo is saying, we also have to look at the social, governance, but also the social context in which we are living, where women are still not able to participate equitably in economic affairs.
Okay, because we are just about to go for the first debate, so let me just get some quick thoughts, Professor Awiti, and then to Dennis.
So I think the elephant in the room here is where we are as a society, period. The place of women in our society, in the way we are socialized, has still not moved up even one notch. We're basically trying to apply constitutional and legal frameworks as band-aid to a deep, primordial cultural problem, the place of women in society. This has to come up as a movement. You've got to mobilize the senses of men and women out there to basically move the political needle on this one. Otherwise, they're going to be crying out here the whole time with legislation that we can't enact, constitutional provisions that we cannot basically implement. ODM, for instance, carte blanche just renominated all of its MPs in Western Kenya. They had a chance there to make 50% of those women. They didn't do it. So, and the way Martha Karua's nomination as presidential running mate of a major candidate was greeted by UDA colleagues was just shameful. It shows you the deep-seated cultural norms that we still have to deal with in this country to move women's agenda forward.
Dennis?
No, I think I have nothing to add to this. I'll just say a discussion on gender, just like many of the discussions, we have two Kenyas. We have Kenya on paper, which is the constitution. Then we have Kenya qua ground, which is reality, which is what Alex is saying. And that's it.
Okay.
We haven't found a way to reconcile them. And I think we're stuck there.
Okay, so all the ladies and gentlemen on this table, before we go for the debate, what's the one thing that those two gentlemen must not leave that stage without talking about? Let me start with you, Houghton.
No, I would like to address gender. Let's go for that. Gender and women's empowerment.
Yeah.
Culture. How do we move from a culture, a low trust and a culture of impunity, to a culture of trust, especially the political culture?
Trust?
Yes.
What break it down.
How do we in the BBI they called it the national ethos. I didn't like that term, but we have a culture where corruption is seen to pay. And a study actually done by Aga Khan University in 2015 is still relevant today because the youth don't mind how, I think Kenyans, by any means necessary, you have to make money. We become consumerist, we don't uphold values. So how do we switch that culture? We have enough laws.
Okay, let's go to Sheila.
Integrity for me, because if you're not going to be able to meet all your goals and objectives in your manifesto if you don't look at the software. And that's really our values as a country, the values of the people that you are going to appoint in government, the values of the people around you. That's one question I have, because even for the main, the so-called leading candidates, my question, as they keep on telling us and giving us solutions to corruption, but for me the first problem I see is that they're surrounded by people who have been accused of corruption, some who are even in court, and have been charged with corruption. And so my question therein is, how much do you care about integrity and the values that are so well articulated in Article 10 of our Constitution if you're going to not really consider this as you look at, appointing and propping up people who are going to be part of your campaign and possibly part of your government?
Professor Awiti?
Mine is two issues. One is public institutions. Strengthening accountability of public institutions to the public. They should not leave that stage without talking about how they're going to address that. Because the erosion of the efficacy of public institutions is the reason why we're here today as a country. Where we're now talking about, say, Mwaure should not say that he wants to bring in asset recovery into his office. Let's strengthen public institutions in the places where they are and not reconsolidate power in the office of the president. The second one is public debt.
But right now we have a lot of independent institutions that are not working.
But how are they going to strengthen them? They should focus on strengthening existing public institutions. Public debt now constitutes about 68% of public liability, 68% of GDP. how they're
Okay,
going to deal with that.
we need to get David, Dennis one thing, then we just go.
No, mine very quick, since we've all said this. Balancing the budget.
Balancing the budget. Okay,
With the IMF
let's balance the time here as well, because right now we are taking that break that will lead us into the first debate of the evening. That is a debate between the Agano presidential candidate David Wahiga Mwaure and the Roots presidential candidate Professor George Wajackoyah.
Linda familia na marafiki dhidi ya magonjwa.
The UHC coverage journey is on. NHIF is working under the guidance of the Ministry of Health in the UHC Step Up, which presents an opportunity to secure Kenyans access to quality health services without suffering financial hardship. So take the bold step today and safeguard your families by enrolling to NHIF to ensure health for all.
Kwa majina mimi naitwa Moses Kulia, mkaaji wa hapa Bomboruru, ambao tunafanya na kazi na hii sako yetu ya Geno Sako, ambao ruti yetu ni Bomboruru Saba Feri. Kwa hii kadi ya bima nilichukua 2013, ambapo imeshanisaidia 2018, ambapo bibi yangu alikuwa anajifungua. Tulienda hospitali tukatibiwa, tukahudumiwa vizuri, alafu wakati wa kutoka hatukuitishwa kitu. Kwa hivyo ningemhimiza makondakta wote na madriver wajiandikishe kwa hii bima yetu, ambapo itakuwa inawasimamia.
Linda familia na marafiki dhidi ya magonjwa.
Leaders don't need to have all the answers. Ordinary people often do. If leaders would just listen. The death penalty breaches human rights. In particular, the right to life and the right to live free from torture or cruelty. The death penalty is a symptom of a culture of violence and not a solution to it.
My name is Wilson Kinywan. I am a lawyer by profession. I specialize in human rights and criminal law. I became a lawyer after suffering an innocent conviction that almost got me executed. The reason I do not support death penalty: imagine you execute somebody today and tomorrow you realize you've executed the wrong person. What amount of remedy can bring such a person back to life, back to his family and children? Government, let's abolish death penalty.
In November 2021, 40,000 people were forcefully evicted from their homes. Many months on, they live in plastic tents 16 kilometers from the center of the capital city.
Mimi naitwa Ture, natoka Mukuru kwa Njenga. Last year tuli experience post evictions. Watu waliweza kuumia, wamama, watoto, walemavu, wazee, community mzima ikakuwa affected. Kitu ile tunaomba serikali ambayo itakuja iheshimu haki ya makao kwa kila Mkenya.
August 9th, 2022 offers us a turning point. 1. Turn up and vote. Your vote counts. It's actually the only thing that does in an election. 2. Choose and then hold your leaders accountable. 3. Join the movement of people who stand up against human rights violations. Become a member of Amnesty Kenya today at www.amnestykenya.org.
What is a secondary school in Kenya? It ranges from 106 high-cost national schools educating 3% of the learners, where you find ultra-modern libraries and laboratories, the most experienced principals and teachers, and the best teacher-student ratios. To 7,019, some barely established, understaffed, lacking basic facilities, sub-county schools, educating over 60% of learners. Given that KCSE is the most consequential examination in our education system, isn't it fair that we level the ground for all learners to excel by narrowing the capacity gaps between the worst and best schools to deliver quality education? Usawa agenda calls for a sub-county schools upgrading program and a change from the capitation model to enable small schools to grow. Without these, SDG 4 is a false promise to most Kenyan children.
My core experience can be summarized in a nutshell as one of transformation. I think once I joined this campus, I didn't have a vision of where I wanted to be. I didn't know who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And I feel like the environment and the people who've mentored me along the way have enabled me to find out who I am and have helped me figure out where I want to go in this life. They have a good quality education, which I 100% vouch for.
Enroll at Catholic University of Eastern Africa for courses in nursing, law, business, economics, computer science, education, community health and development, actuarial science, international relations, counseling psychology, regional integration and theology. September intake ongoing at Langata and Eldoret campuses. Email admissions@quer.edu or visit quer.edu. Quer for innovative, marketable graduates.
Karibu Kam. By offering market linkages, networking opportunities, and technical assistance, Kenya Association of Manufacturers assists its members to grow and scale up their businesses. Join us and let us work together to grow the manufacturing sector. Becoming a CAM member is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Kenya Association of Manufacturers, driving global competitiveness.
Check it. Let's talk about banking. Or let's talk about dreams and goals. Your dreams, your goals.
If you're like Louise, you value doing biz with ease. Or maybe you're like Dan, a family man with a plan. At Diamond Trust Bank, it starts with one dream, one goal, one deposit, and one transaction. Pamoja, let's make it happen. So don't just bank with us, bank on us.
Najivunia sana kwa Mkenya kwa sababu ni nchi ya amani.
Naweza tembea Kenya yote bila kusumbuliwa.
Kenya is one country that is most admired because of marathon runners.
Our culture is one of the best in the world.
Nashukuru kwa sababu ya demokrasia tulionayo.
Kenya ni nchi bora, yani yapendeza tu.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Pope Paul VI Learning Resource Center at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, right here in Nairobi. My name is Ken Mijungu from KTN News.
And I am Smriti Vidyarthi of NTV. Welcome to the first of two presidential debates between the four presidential candidates cleared to run for president in the forthcoming election. This is the fifth of 6 national televised debates organized through a joint media presidential debates initiative, bringing together literally the entire Kenyan media fraternity.
That's right, and the candidates participating in this debate have agreed to the rules and guidelines requiring them to conduct themselves with utmost decorum, address each other with respect, and extend honor to viewers watching this debate live across all Kenya's broadcast media platforms.
The candidates in the debate have also agreed to observe the highest standard of ethics in their conduct on the debate platform. The candidates are not permitted to carry or refer to their mobile phones or to wear any listening devices, including earphones. A medically recommended hearing aid is exempted from this rule, but luckily we have confirmed that none of the candidates is on a hearing aid.
And once again, ethics and guidelines also remind the candidates that they shall not carry to the debate platform any written material, whether books or journals, manifestos or articles, including even handwritten notes.
Now, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, 2 minutes to answer a question, and 60 seconds for a rebuttal. The topics have carefully been selected after a thorough assessment of the state of our nation and the sentiments of the regular Kenyan voters in various parts of the country.
And in line with the debate rules and best practices, now the questions we shall be asking tonight have not been shared with any of the campaign teams. Neither were they discussed or even formulated in conjunction with anyone. Now the questions are entirely our very own.
An invited audience seated right here in the auditorium has also agreed to the debate rules. They have been fully briefed that cheers, jeers, or any other form of noise is not permitted during the debate. We, however, make an exception now as we request the audience to help us warmly welcome Professor George Wajackoyah and Mr. Wahiga Mwaure to the stage.
Thank you so much, and from the outset we'd like to state that Professor George Wajackoyah was in the vicinity of the debate auditorium, and he could also be around, but he has elected not to participate in this debate tonight. But the show must go on.
That's right. Welcome, Mr. Wahiga, to this debate. Thank you for honoring your invitation. You have 2 minutes to make your opening statement.
Thank you for this invite. Nice meeting you, Smriti. Thank you, Ken. My name is David Mwaure Wahiga. I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm a lawyer by profession. I'm an ordained minister of the gospel. I'm the party leader of Agano Party, and as it's obvious now, I'm one of the four persons who are running for presidency this year. Let me start by recognizing all of you who are present here, Wanjiku and every Kenyan who is listening. Let me also pass greetings of peace to my running mate, to my competitor who is not here, and to the others. I would also like to take the earliest opportunity to pass my condolences to the people who are involved in the Nithi Bridge accident. We have lost a lot of Kenyans as I stand here to talk about the future. But let me end with the few seconds remaining, and because I'm alone, I hope I will be extended a few seconds, to say that I am here as an anti-corruption crusader. I am here as a friend of the people of Kenya and the people of the universe. I am here as a person, a man of peace. We are at a very defining moment in Kenya. For me, the elections of 9th August are very defining. 59 years after independence, we still have to discuss, we still have to find out what we need to do with this nation going into the future. Because the question begs answers. Why is it that 59 years after independence, Kenyans cannot afford not even a single meal per day? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high cost of living than we have had before? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high level of unemployment? And why, 59 years after independence, are we so indebted than we've never done before? And yet, those we were born together with, those we obtained independence with us, a number of them, and many of them have gone on ahead. And right now, they are fast worlds, they are even competing with greater nations.
Mr. Wahiga, thank you. Your
Thank
2
you.
minutes was up and we did accord you a few more seconds since you are alone. Why, Mr. Wahiga, does a man of the cloth, a man of God, want to get deeper into politics here in Kenya and be the president of this nation?
You know, leadership is part of what, if I go spiritual, God created. And in my faith, the Christian faith, we say all leadership comes from God. And He gives men and women here on earth the determination, the wherewithal to choose who He may lead. But I'm not just a man of cloth. I'm a lawyer by profession and a senior lawyer, senior counsel by virtue of years, with that 9 years to my belt. Not only that, like I have said, I am a person who has lived and watched in this nation, read the history of this nation, read the histories of other nations. And I am here because also the Constitution allows me, I fit the bill to come and run for presidency. But I come again as a new person in this area. This is my second stab at the president, but I've not been there before. But I'm here because I believe the elections of 9th August require a new person, a new bloom, a clean person. We need to change if this nation will go forward. That's why I come in as a man of cloth as well.
Mr. Wahiga, the reasons you give tonight, basically every Kenyan would give them. What is unique in your proposition?
Why should that be my position? I am tired, like Kenyans are. I am disappointed by the leadership we've had so far. I am also one of those Kenyans who have sat back and watched at the leadership that again wants to come back. A lot of us out there and Kenyans are saying, why do we have to recycle them? I'll tell you what leadership is all about. And because I'm a man of the cloth as well, and the cloth reflects who I am. I'm a little disappointed, and doubly disappointed that my competitor couldn't come in. If he would have come in, he would have come in a durag, because that represents who he is. This represents my inner me. But leadership, if you have occasion to look, and we read books here, the scripture, the man, one of the people I follow much, is one who was known as King David. And it says, when he was the president, the prime minister of the nation of Israel, it's written of him that he shepherded that nation according to integrity of heart and skillfulness of his hands. Leadership is about taking care, providing, making a way. And that's why, as a man of cloth, as a lawyer, and for the first time we have a lawyer as a presidential candidate, it is so defining that a person like me, because if a man of cloth would follow the ways of the scripture and the ways of our constitution, if he would follow the ways that are right and accepted international standards, he would not steal from his people, we would not have the level of scandals we've had in this nation, which I'll talk in a moment. We will not have our development funds, public funds stashed abroad. And this is why we are here. Poor 59 years. Yeah. But nations that we got independence with, and I can just mention two, Singapore, South Korea, smaller nations than ourselves, nations with people who are equally gifted like Kenyans are gifted. We are nowhere near catching up with them. I am here because I believe we've got what it takes as Kenyans. We can do it, and we have a reason after 9th to do it and move forward.
Mr. Wahiga, the church does play a crucial role in national development and in securing our nation in many ways and in bringing guidance to the people. But many would argue that in many ways the church has failed us. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't agree with them. I wouldn't agree with them. To the contrary, my thinking is that the church has not been fully involved in governance, separate but yet a very important partner. Talking about the liberations we've had in this nation, from 1963, the fight for independence, talking about the first liberation, the second, the constitution review, the church was very key. Religious organizations are important. Faith is an integral part of mankind, and every person, it doesn't matter who it is, believes in something, follows something, and refers to something when the time comes, when push comes, when pull comes to push. But you would have to be specific, because I know the church has been speaking out. We've had Bishop Sokulu, we had Muge, we have Joya still with us, gallant men of this nation. And I can say we are here because of that. Probably what you are referring to is you expect more. This time you have one of them, but also a professional in his own right.
The voices you have mentioned are voices of yesteryears. I'm yet to hear you mention the current voices speaking, because your voice has been silent on this. We haven't heard you condemn what's going on in the country. We haven't seen you come out loud. And specific example, when politicians infiltrate the church and stand at the podium and speak about politics, we have never heard you condemn this.
Well, you know, there are many ways to engage, and I've engaged in my area. Standing for me here is a journey of about 22 years. This is a starting that started from the year 2000. And this is not even my first time to express an interest in leading this nation. This is my 6th stab at an election. And in all that, it's been an expression of the fact that I have been unhappy. I have been unhappy. As a party leader, we have had occasion. We may not probably have been as loud, or if you wish, you may not have covered us. And I'm not referring to you particularly, Ken, but we have spoken out on matters. It's not the first time that I'm speaking against corruption. And you know, there is a greater way of expressing opposition. By your example, by who you were. As I stand here, I know nobody can accuse me of having been involved in any of these scandals. As I stand here, I'm a witness. I am an example of the fact that any Kenyan can run for presidency. As I stand here, I am here to break this sort of wall where we believed only a certain person and peoples. The Catholic Church has been issuing statements, NCCK has done that, Evangelical Alliance, the Muslims have been speaking. Probably it's only that they haven't been covered as much.
You yourself say that this is your 6th stab at an election. You have been unsuccessful in the past, for example, when you ran for governor of Lamu in 2013. So what's different now? What makes you think you will win this race?
There is nothing in life like not giving up. And the trouble we can be in Kenya is if we give up as we go forward to the 9th. One of my persons I followed much is Abraham Lincoln. And if I remember my history right, it was during his 13th attempt, though before that he had won some legislative position, that he became the President of the United States. And when he did that, we know that he's the one who brought about the slavery emancipation, something to date that speaks to this world about the fact that all men and women are created equal. And that's why we can speak tonight as we are here. I am an example of a person who does not give up. I have not lost in every election, I can tell you. Like the last one of 2017, I would tell you that's an election where I believe I was rigged out. It's only that I couldn't get the facts, and I had done my bit. That was the election, if you remember, where one of my competitors said that people were voted through the computer. I was going to be the senator of Lamu County. But here I am. You must live to fight another day. I am here because there is no room for giving up. The trouble in Kenya, we are where we are because we've given up. Right now, as I speak to you, and I thank you for this opportunity, Media Council, there are Kenyans who have said, tutapiga kura tu yeyote, fatalistic attitude. But thank you for the opportunity to tell Kenyans that, no, there is still another one. We don't have to recycle. There's change this time.
Maybe because you've not gotten the opportunity, that's why you can stand tall and say you have not been involved in any corruption, perhaps if you had an opportunity. But away from that, as an advocate, would you advocate for the division, complete division between the state and religion?
First, on your first question, it's not that I have not had an opportunity, I have not been appointed at the top. No, I have had occasions where I have led, but also in my private life. You see, it fights from the lowest unit as a lawyer. I can stand here and say, I have not been accused. I have not stolen clients' money. It's not just here. I've had these positions of responsibility. I've sat on the Council of the Law Society. I've sat in several corporate and non-governmental and religious boards. But so it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that I'm in. But coming to your question, would I advocate? I think it's important that state and region be separated. And by that, I think we need to define what that means. Because basically, it's saying that every person in a state should be allowed to exercise their faith without the government imposing on them who it is, what faith they should follow. And that's where the whole principle about state and religion comes from. But also, religious organizations have a very important part to play in the nation. They teach about better ways of living, morals. They bring governments to book. They call out when things are not going right. I do not know of any religion that condones corruption, stealing from the poor, taking money from the sick. You know, I do not know of any religion that talks about fighting, hating your neighbor. I know every religion advocates for the golden rule. Love your neighbor, peace. And they are an important component. And in a Ghana government, in a Mwaure Wahiga government, religious leaders will play a very pivotal role. To the extent I believe, in my government, they'll even sit in cabinet. In my government, when they perform civic duties, which they do, they should even be remunerated because they are helping the government. They are rendering a service.
Mr. Mwaure, the question is, would you want this taken out of the Constitution completely? 32 guarantees this. You're talking to us what exists in the Constitution. What is your view? Would you want it taken off completely, or you still want it to be under the control of the state?
Come again. You need to repeat that question. Let me get you right, Ken.
The question is, what you're telling us tonight is what is entrenched in the Constitution.
Right.
My question is, as an advocate, would you want 32(1) to be expunged completely so that it's not guaranteed in the Constitution?
No, not at all, not at all. The freedom of worship and the separateness of the state and government, those are key. Standing here as a man of color, I'm probably speaking to a person who thinks, now my faith has no place in future. But standing here in who I am inside is a representation of the fact that I'll take care of everybody. Because my faith says, treat all people equal. Become a person of peace. Share equally. Defend the voiceless. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And exercise not just equality, but equity for all. That is true religion. And for my faith, the Christian faith, that's what it stands for.
Mr. Wahiga, more often than not, we see on television the church being used by politicians, the pulpit being used by politicians for them to play politics. What is your view on this? How are you going to ensure that stops?
It's not all churches that do that. First of all, a number of churches have different requirements and order of how they do things. And some of them permit, some do not. It's also important to recognize that in our society and many societies, church is a place where people meet, is a place that brings people together. I think what's important is to define what can be said within a church context building, a church building context, because the church is a place of worship. And it should not be a place where people should come and attack others, hurl abuses at others. No, that's not true religion. It's not a place where people should come and speak ill of another tribe. It's not a place even where people should come in and condone the sort of things that have made our nation be what it is those many years that I've mentioned. So I would say I don't see a problem either way. The only way, it should be tempered. It should be able to pass the same message for which a church sanctuary or any other faith exists.
But you haven't quite answered the question. What is it that you will do to ensure that those tempers are brought down and dirty politics are not played in church?
I think speaking from here, I would only urge fellow spiritual leaders and religious leaders to, right now we are calling for peace, and I've been calling for that in my campaign. I've been speaking out and reminding Kenyans that we have a life after 9th. We have a nation. Our nation is not completely down and under. There is hope for this nation. And I would just urge them, as the CEO of this nation, I don't think I can order them, nor can I register it as to how they should conduct themselves. But I know our religious leaders of all faiths, and even church leaders who I'm closer to, they know what they should do, and they are listening to us. They are listening to us.
We'll now move to the topic of leadership and integrity. Apart from the professional, real record in the professional service, that's the Law Society of Kenya, and what you have done to the community, you don't have an apparent record of public service. What do you bring to the table to Kenyans, to table and tell them, because of this and that, I stand here tall and I can ask you to give me your vote?
Public service, I don't have a record. I think what you're saying is that I've not been elected or appointed into a position. Yes, there can only probably be one appointment into any given position. I have indicated the number of years that I've been in the legal profession. That's a position of responsibility. I have been involved, I have led a party for the last 16 years. That is a story of success in Kenya. A story of success, a party that has fielded people, a party that has stood up for what it was registered and formed for. Not only that, I have led, as far as I can remember, high school, I was in leadership positions. I have sat in both corporate and other boards where I have given leadership decisions. In all my life, I've found myself being moved to leadership positions, except the one that I'm looking for. But you know what? There is always a time for one to start. There is always an Obama moment and a Mandela moment for a person. I believe this for me is an Obama, is a Mandela, not just for me, but for Kenyans. But if you allow me to turn out your question, Ken.
Yes.
I am not sure I would have wanted to have some experience that I see with some of the leadership that will stand here or has stood here. I wouldn't want that experience. What experience are we talking about of? Running our country down, scandals, corruption, you know, named in every other scandal, and yet they want to be a president. They have named in everything that has brought our nation to its knees, which it is now. If it's not them, it's their relatives, it's people close to them. For me, that is not experience. If that's part of the experience you probably are referring to, I feel I'm so grateful tonight that I'm not part of it. But I can assure you, if I had gotten in that position, I would have been the same person that you're looking at tonight.
Apart from telling Kenyans what you bring to the table, being tried and tested, Mr. Wahiga, is a very big issue in this country. I want you to look at your opponents who are not there tonight and tell Kenyans why you, why not Kenya Kwanza, why not Azimio, and why not Roots, in terms of integrity.
Kenyans, as I said at the beginning, we are at a defining moment. The elections of 9th August are pretty defining for the reasons I said before. High cost of living that we have never had before, high cost of food prices, such high employment as we've never had before, such high debt, foreign debt, not to mention the internal debt that we have. A lot of we had them in 2013. We had them in 1997, in 2007. And the question that you Kenyans, you must be asking, like I'm asking, what is the difference now? I even want to go further and say, even for those who it is said they might have decided, looking at the four of us, who can you say has made a difference in your life this far? If so, why are we where we are? Why do we still have money that should have been used in developing our country, stashed in nations abroad, illegally obtained and legally stashed? These are public resources. I'm not talking about personal private money. Why are we here at a time like this? And the Auditor General 4 years back tells us 215 billion Kenya shillings from Eurobond cannot be accounted for. It cannot be traced. It is a mystery. Why are we here before? And the Auditor General Nancy tells us this year that 70 billion Kenya shillings alone has not been used. Why are we here in a year like this when we have that much foreign loan? The Auditor General tells us about 540 billion Kenya shillings is in an accounted expenditure. And yet, this was a government that was supposed to change things. We had hope, but it didn't turn so. I believe the only thing that will move us forward is complete change from the top to the bottom. And what is permanent is only change, as they say. Recycling them will not take us anywhere. That's why this is a very defining election.
But you haven't told us why not those candidates. What, for example, would you want to say about these candidates?
Well, come again.
What would you want to say about these candidates, the other candidates who you're running against for president?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would like to say they have been there before. One of them has been a deputy president and is still a deputy president of this republic. He is in government. The things he is saying he can do are things he could have done these last 10 years, this last 20, this last 30, because he's in government that long, and he has not done so. The other one has been a former prime minister. He's been in a coalition, a co-president, if you wish, sharing the government 50-50. The things he is promising are things he could have done, but he has not done. He's been in this race for the last 40 years. And the other one has been in government also. He's been with the police force, he's been in the intelligentsia, and even right now, I believe he is still in there. And the thing I'm saying is, if you take even this last 10 years, let me just take these last 10 years, where we have a deputy president who wants to run for presidency. This year, my team and I have counted these last 10 years, not less than 22 scandals that have taken place in broad daylight. And those are the ones that have been reported. There are others, we are told, are secret agreements about contracts to make roads that we don't know what they say. If you go to the former coalition government, where we had one of my competitors has been a co-president, a prime minister. We have counted about 12 scandals, and they have been there. They were even there in the Mwaure regime. And the final one, you've worked in government, you've traveled across the world, you must know something about our funds which are stashed abroad there. You are in the intelligentsia, you have served, you never retire from that. They don't fit the bill. They are not helping Kenyans.
Okay.
They are not taking what the issues are.
All right, let's turn to our next topic. for discussion tonight, and that is the state of the economy. Now, you are on record, Mr. Wahiga, saying that within the first 100 days of assuming office, you will bring down the cost of living for Kenyans. How exactly do you intend to do that, and by how much?
You know, this is a serious matter, and I have not just said. In Kenya, we're facing problems at two levels. There's what you refer to similarity. There's what I consider as a short term, and there is a long term. Up until we called for the reduction, for a reintroduction of the foods, of the unga subsidy, unga was retailing going on to about 250. It was after we had announced in our manifesto that we would bring that. Thankfully, it's been brought down. But that's not all. And I'm glad that we are leading and others are following. We still know that the price of cooking oil is very high. I think now it's about 400. Bread has not come down, retailing 90, 100. Fuel is still at high prices. And those are immediate things. We don't need to wait to restructure our loan, or we don't want to wait, because those are some of the solutions I have had, to plant a kind of plant, probably, and wait for it to be harvested. We don't have to wait, you know, because Kenyans are hungry. They need immediate results. And what I have done, and you'll find that in my manifesto, we sat down with my team of experts and thought, what is the immediate? And our proposals have come in threesome. There was unga, which has been done. Thank you very much. We thank His Excellency, the President. But in the same measure, we say also other things could have come down. But we have said we shall introduce subsidies into other food products. That's number one. Number two, we have also said that we are going to reduce pay by 50% so that Kenyans can have money they can take home with. And that is something that will benefit about 16, 17 million Kenya shillings. If you are earning about 25,000, you'll be able to take an extra 1,000. If you are earning about 35, 40, that's another 4,000. We have also come and said to spur growth, throw some money into the economy. We shall waive away tax penalties that are accrued after the day we are sworn.
All right,
and you know, we are looking for ways to put some money in the pocket of Kenyans, something to spur, something to enable them put food on the table. Because as a country, I'm talking to you while we are broke. We are broke as a country. The most we can do is continue borrowing. I'm looking for solutions from within.
All right,
what can we do now?
And you have said that you would reduce pay by 50%, but pay accounts for 25% of Kenya's tax revenue. How then would you meet revenue targets?
You know, that is not, it's not a problem. And I was going to say that's not the only problem there is in Kenya. If I take away 50%, the amount of pay we get is 460 billion. 460 billion. So 50% will be 230. When I take that money and I put into the pockets of working Kenyans, I tell you as I stand here, it will perform wonders. Kenyans are looking for any extra shilling that they can get. But how do I bridge that gap? We have tried to work around and see what can we do. And those are short-term measures because Kenyans have to survive. Otherwise, they will die, you know. We pay the taxes, the foreign loan we pay is at 1.3 billion. And we have sat down and said, if we can persuade our friends, and Kenya has many friends, I'm glad they are represented, even here, by the foreign embassies and diplomats who are here, and tell them, why don't you just accept a repayment of 1 trillion instead of 1.3? That will bring about 300 billion. We can bring back to bridge in the gap, and we are positive that it will be able to do that. But also the 260 billion, that we put into Kenyans' pockets. Kenyans are industrious. Kenyans have goodwill from within. Kenyans are hardworking. And this is a nation that can get money, has had money, and will get money under a new government. The 260 billion, we see it bringing returns because it will go in people starting small businesses. People will be able to start their kiosks or do something else or start what we call side hustles. What Kenyans need is just a little money, and they can be able to move forward. The other thing we have thought about is spread the tax base. That's something we are looking into immediately now in office. But I need to talk to you about corruption and the money that's stashed abroad.
We're coming to that.
Yeah, we go to that. But before we talk about that, you're running for president, and you understand also as an advocate of the High Court,
right,
that for you to change some of these regulations, you will need Parliament. You give a time frame of about 100 days. Is it possible that you can get these legislations through Parliament in the period you're giving us? Or they're interim and just campaign rhetorics that you're using?
To bring food subsidies to zero rate of foods and all that, I will not need Parliament.
No, for example, changing the pay as you earn, cutting it by 50%.
I'll let for that. I'll tell you what.
Yes.
The parliamentarians who are coming in, the MCAs, understand the problems I'm talking about. They too are tired. I see goodwill will come forth. I am talking about something that every Kenyan would want to see happen. 59 years after independence, we can't continue being a nation of begging, family bowls being held up like we have seen this year. We should be self-sufficient in terms of food, water. I mean, people should not go without medicine. That's what I'm talking about. So, I mean, you know what, Ken? There is no shortcut. There is no shortcut. Look at, because I've looked at the manifestos of my other friends, my other competitors, I'm even the one coming with something close to realism, something close to practical. And I believe we'll find ways where I have to use executive orders, which exist, which are there in our constitution. I will apply them. We are in an emergency. We are in a time of war. This time calls for leadership.
In your view, what is the biggest challenge to our economy? Is it we don't manufacture enough, we don't trade enough, or is it regulations?
It's neither of those. Those could be the others. It's because we steal, we cut away, we siphon money that is supposed to go into our manufacturing, money that's supposed to go into our agriculture. That's what we have specialized in the last 10 years. Money that is supposed to go into our skill building, money that is supposed to go into the health of our fellow Kenyans, and a healthy person is a productive person. That's what we do. This is a nation where Kenyans work hard, Kenyans labor, Kenyans have got quite a measure of work ethics, but they don't get reward for their labor. For instance, to date, we don't have explanations as what we did with the Euroboat loans. When you listen to me, and you listen to others who have spoken out there, they say even for the SGR, the amount we are repaying is not the money we use for that. I am here, and I am borne evidence by a former minister, and allow me to mention the Honorable Joseph Nyaga, God rest his soul in eternal peace. That was in 2020 when he said it's time for us to bring our money back to develop our country. He was an angry person. He had served in the government for about 40 years. He was tired. Our money that is supposed to develop this country, move us forward, is hanging out there in nations that are willing to bring it back if only there's goodwill from my end. I am bringing goodwill. I'm saying, Kenyans, we must change. Those brothers and sisters who went ahead of us did not have two brains, Ken. They did not two heads. They don't even have a landmass. They don't have what we have, but they are great brothers and sisters. We can do it. It's time now, Kenyans, to go to where we went wrong and find out why and do it clean, have a clean start.
Two things. One, what you're saying has nothing to do with growing the economy. What you're saying is the generalities. What I want to know, the role of manufacturing in growing the economy, the role of trade, and the role of regulations. And while you answer that, perhaps tell us how much money in your mind are you thinking can be brought back to the country?
How much money
is outside needs to be brought back to the country?
I'll start with that and I'll come to what you're talking about, manufacturing, regulations and all that, because that's an important area. In the budget of 2017-2018, Henry Rotich, as he then was, the cabinet secretary, said to us that 14.6, which was rounded up to 15 trillion, was stashed abroad and needed to be brought back. To date, that money has never been brought back. We've never had a report. Later, in the year 2020, the late Honorable Joseph Nyaga called again, and his was a cry, please, let's bring our money back, we develop this country. If that was about 15 trillion, and since then 5 years have gone by, we use 2 billion per day, that's about 730 billion, give it 1 trillion round up, that's about another 5 billion, 5 billion. When in my consideration, we have not less than 20 trillion outside the country that can be brought back. And if it is brought back, this country will be turned upside down and turned into a country that we can't tell that it is the same country.
On that
and
point,
that's just one area.
On that point, Mr. Wahiga, during the deputy presidential debate, your deputy presidential running mate, Ruth, said that you have already written to the United Nations and 15 other countries to start getting this money back into Kenya, and the hope is that if you assume office, the money will be back in Kenya. Have you had any response from these countries?
No, I have not heard, and I appreciate that we are in the period of elections, but I'm glad to know that things we've done, for us our 100 days already started, if you wish, by that effort, and also calling for the Unga subsidy, which was effected. But they are listening. We've got goodwill from out there. We've got great friends from out of Kenya. And I know they too have been saying they wish Kenya can have a president who is speaking the things I'm speaking. I've not heard from them, but I know they are looking at goodwill. You know, I can mention a couple of other things. During the Jubilee period, we have signed instruments with the Swiss government. The Prime Minister was sometime back here in Kenya, with Theresa May, when she was the Prime Minister, about repatriating our funds which are out there.
All right, but you are also on record having said that if these countries do not work with you and your government, you will cut off diplomatic ties. How practical is that?
Wow, why isn't it? Why can't it be done? If a country is holding our money, it knows that it is supposed to be Eurobond money, or it is money from SGR, and it's aware. What else are we talking about? International cooperation, international friendship? How can you refer to a person, and here I mean a nation, as your friend? But what I know is that a lot of countries have been willing to send back our money. It's only that there have been no goodwill with the current leadership, the immediate past, and the leadership that wishes to be recycled.
But if they do not, will you cut off diplomatic ties?
Everything is on the table. Kenya needs to move forward. There has to be hard measures. But I can tell you, it won't need to get there. There's goodwill out there. There has been a cry. It's the other nations that they have even got a lot of dossier than I have of what has been done in this nation. And this has nothing to do with somebody who has worked hard and earned. It's Kenyan money, some of it which has been given to us from out there, and yet we have not used it carefully. But you also referred me to,
yes,
is it about manufacturing regulations?
We will get back to that, but this is important. Are you telling our traditional partners and allies that everything is on the table, including cutting ties?
Oh, yes, yes. That's what David Mwaure is saying.
Do you not think that would have a massive negative impact on our country, our economy, our development?
Imagine you are a nation called Simiriti and you are holding 10 trillion that is supposed to be Kenyan money. You know it. What then can we talk about? Rights, human rights? What more human rights? We are not in a state of war as a nation. Surpasses you are saying, look here, Kenya. There are these individuals, 1, 2, 3, 4, who are holding your money. We have traced it using the various instruments, using the various secret agents and other, and we know it is part of this. I mean, like for instance, and it must be common knowledge, there are nations right now that have come with laws. If you take money out there, and you are not able to tell who it is appropriated that nation, by that nation, and used for development. Kenyan wealth is being used to develop other nations. It is immoral. It is wrong. You are not a friend of Kenya if you are using Kenyan money to develop your nation. Kenyans are suffering now. They need their money back. Bring our money back is our campaign.
whichever country it is, including the US, the United Kingdom, you're telling them tonight, you'll go for them?
Oh yes, yes. Yes, everybody. You are holding our money. The nations you have mentioned have brought democracy to us. They have done a lot of good things to us. But you know what? I am telling you, 99% of them have wanted to. What we have missed in this nation is a leadership, is goodwill. It's a leadership says, let's do it. This country will not be the same 5 years down the line. This nation will be a nation where you will want to invest in. This nation has that potential. It's our time. It's our season. That's what I'm saying. I am actually passing a message to them.
Take us back to the economy now. Manufacturing, regulations, and trade. Take us back there.
Yes. You asked me, could those also be problems? We have to change also in a number of things in the way we do business. Granted, one could argue and say 65, maybe 70 of our regulations are good, but we can improve on them. Corruption has been a big problem. Bureaucracy has been the other problem. Very high taxation, particularly the corporate tax, has been a problem in Kenya. We've got to think twice. Yes, of course, I mentioned the key one has been corruption. I was there and I was grown up. I was working in the year 2002 when we got in the Kibaki regime. And I am aware, and I got it from people who knew, how nations come to Kenya. Because within the first 4 months, there was such active effort to get corruption out of our streets and what we were doing. And they wanted to invest. I actually came to learn they were being told, no, we've had enough. We don't need you. We can't do that. But I've also heard of instances, and I'm speaking to somebody who is listening here in Kenya or out there. They have to come to Kenya, applied for tenders, won tenders on all fours, and then when they went to get their tender acceptance letter, they were told, before you get this tender, you have one more step to step. You need to pass. You need to go and see Mr. XY said. Apparently, the information I have is that some of the people who needed to be seen, if the 4 of us were here, are my competitors. Though you have passed all the steps for the tender, it cannot be approved until a final step, which is not in the official list, is approved. These are facts that are known, and people have said, how can we do this? You told us that it's above board. People know of offices in this country where people went to pay 10%, 20% after they had passed all the tenders. And some of those men and women are going to line up here in coming days, maybe after this or in other platforms, and say we'll fight corruption. Our problem has been corruption, almost in our veins. But I know Kenyans are not corrupt. Kenyans don't like corruption. We showed it in the year 2000. So we need to improve on that. We have had problems with power, infrastructure, both energy and the infrastructure on the ground. Those are the issues that we need to discuss and we need to look into. We have had Kenyans who have gone out there or gained a lot of knowledge. They have wanted to come to Kenya and they have wanted to set up industries, manufacturing entities, to get things going. But bureaucracy, corruption, red tape has been our undoing.
Is this the reason why you are advocating for making public all the contracts, starting with SGR, the expressway, the Lamu port, Naivasha dry port, Kisumu port? Is this the reason, part of the reason why?
Part of the reason, but the other reason, Ken, is that there is no way we can fight future corruption unless we do with the current and the past. We must have a discussion amongst Kenyans. And I know what you are referring to. You are referring to the fact that we have said we'll also establish a Truth and Recovery Commission. We must have a conversation and ask, why have we been this corrupt? Why have we allowed this much corruption? It's got to start there. For South Africa, it had to start there. Truth. The Truth Commission that was set up, It was a starting point and it was key. We must discuss and talk about that. But that's not all that we'll be doing in that. Actually, that will be part of it. We must still ask how much money went into the SGR. We need to know how much, who are the KEMSA billionaires, and why have their names not been read out, and the money that they took away brought back into the country. This, the Honorable Deputy President of this Republic knows who they are. This, the former Prime Minister know what they are. This, Professor Wajackoyah know who they are, being a person in the intelligentsia. And yet, they are not ready or willing to tell it. How can they fight corruption? How can they lead? How can you also lead when you are not ready to come on a podium like this and tell Kenyans what you want to do for them?
As we end the topic on economy, you mentioned earlier 15 trillion shillings that is stashed outside. You mentioned earlier 15 trillion shillings that is stashed outside.
Yes.
However, this could be the whole amount of money from Kenya that is outside, because the Brookings Institution says that about $12.5 billion. That's the only money that perhaps is illicit trade or illicit flow from Kenya to the other countries that is stashed outside. Why would you be going for even the investments that have been made by Kenyans outside and not specifically this illicit financial money that has been flowing to other countries? Why would you go for everything?
No, we go for everything, Ken. For me, that was read by the Minister of the 14.6, 15 trillion. It was the Minister for Finance. It was the Treasury Cabinet Secretary who said that. He had the facts, he had the intelligence, he must have spoken with State House and they knew about it. His speech, some executive summary had been sent round, so it was known. He had contacted foreign governments and known there is probably as much as that. So I find no reason why. I've seen other records that talk about 6 trillion, but you know, we've never had evidence that has been brought back. But let's even come back to Kenya. You and I have not even discussed the 2 billion. The 2 billion, which adds to 730 billion per year. I'll round it up to call it 1 trillion. That's what we lose per year. So if that is what we have lost per year, these last 5 years, that is 5 trillion. During the last 5 years, if everything worked that way, that was another 5 trillion, if my maths work right. What we are saying, even with the 2 billion, we could have paid the 8.2 trillion Kenya shillings. We could have done that from the 2 billion without going for anything out there, and yet we still need to go out there. I mean, this matter of corruption, ciphering public money, and what we've been doing has been our undoing. No country can develop with corruption. And with the level of corruption that we have had in this nation, no wonder we are still begging and our people are going hungry. I've just given the 2 billion. And for us within Agano Party and with our experts, the 2 billion for us, we say is not even, can't even be a correct figure.
The 2 billion, Mr. Mwaure, the 2 billion from the Institute of Economic Affairs is not necessarily lost. It's been diverted to other uses. So if education was allocated 600 billion, perhaps they took a portion of it to another use, not necessarily lost. So when you do that sum totality, could you just be misleading us? Because this money was allocated to something and probably just diverted to another use and not the intended purpose. That's why we lack classrooms, for example.
Ken, the president of our nation, did not lie. He said 2 billion is lost. 2 billion. 2 billion does not get into the economy. And later he was heard to say in matters corruption, I mean, he had tried his best. The word he used was his hands were tied.
But the Institute of Economic Affairs says this money is not necessarily lost. It goes to other purposes.
I mean, but why can't we see the effect? Why do we have such high cost of living? Why have Kenyans been going hungry? What are these other things? What has the Institute said? For me, I would say it's gone into people's pockets. For me, I would say part of that money would be on its way to some countries. I mean, the whole area of our financial fidelity, our being the shepherd I referred to, our doing what our brothers did. You see, from the word go, Singapore took such a firm and a stern position, the President Lee Kuan-yew, concerning matters corruption. And I submit to us that that nation would not have been where it is if he had done so. No nation can develop with corruption. Rwanda has come up just lately, and look at what our brother is doing over there. I mean, phenomenal similarity. I need to emphasize that.
Okay.
Just recently, it's not even 1963. Give Rwanda another 5 years. Botswana, they also fought corruption. You cannot move forward with corruption.
Let's just come back to here. And you spoke about Kenya needing to be self-sufficient. We need to be a food-secure nation. There is a very close link between food security and climate change. We are seeing droughts. Millions of people are starving in our country, yet your manifesto speaks very little to climate change. What mitigation and adaptation measures is your government going to put in place to cushion Kenyans against climate shocks?
Climate change, the whole issue of the changing patterns of the weather is of concern to me and my team. Right now we are experiencing weather we have not had before. We have stopped talking of today was very hot or today was very cold, the way we defined it. We are now even going into what were the centigrades per day. You've noticed in our manifesto we've talked not just about measures we'll do, but even the fact that we would introduce taxation. We've noticed that. The first one is a poll tax for people who interfere with things that go into ensuring that we are not influencing the climatic changes that we are seeing, we have in Kenya, we are seeing in other nations. But it is very important in Kenya we have a discussion round about this matter before we become industrialized, because we are going to be industrialized. We have seen what the gases from the industries have done to other nations. And we don't have to wait to get there for us to deal with that situation.
So how are you going to deal with it?
The things I have in mind is, it
a
is
reminder
time.
to our audience, please, as per the debate rules, no cheering, jeering, or noise. Do continue.
Yes, sorry, come again. What was that?
My question is
how? Let me give
how are you going to ensure Kenyans remain food secure vis-a-vis climate change? What measures does
we
your
must bring
government
education,
have
that's number one. We must tell Kenyans that our rivers are important, our forests are important, our mountains are important. We must come back and enforce. We have laws that have to do with things that affect climate. But right now, you know, we have cut down about half the trees in Kenya. We must find ways of preserving our water. Kenya is very watered, but all the water goes to the ocean. We must come back even to a city like Nairobi and ask, why did we allow this building to be built next to a river? We must go to sources of water. Sources of water have been grabbed, and next to them, as much as developers can get, built houses. We must get to a point where we say, if something was done irregularly, it needs to be pulled down.
Mr. Wahiga, does the Agano Party have a plan to make Kenyans more resilient in the wake of climate change and ensuring food security and therefore bringing down the cost of living? Do you have a plan?
We do have a plan.
What is that
because
plan?
Agriculture is very important to us. And if you'd have noticed, we've said that the office of the president will keep a very close eye to agriculture. Because without food security, we are going nowhere. We can't be begging. Those many years after we became independent and we started ruling ourselves. We have talked about the preservation of our rivers. We've talked about injecting money. We've talked about bringing subsidies that enable farmers to produce fertilizer. We've talked about that. We've talked about exploring markets. We've talked about getting Kenya to where it was in terms of agriculture. You know what? We are not short of studies. We are not short of, as a nation, of projects that have come into being. Gallara would have been, is a case study. It's a case study. The nation of Israel, and I can't purport to be their spokesperson, were disappointed, and very many nations have been disappointed. That was something, but look at what we did with it. It's amongst the scandals that we have in the Jubilee government. This is what I'm saying, we are not going to allow anymore. So we must, it is one of the two areas that my office as the president, if Kenyans are pleased to vote me, that one, agriculture, and the whole area of asset recovery, I've said it's something every day I'll keep an eye on. I would want a report on it. I would want to know what is happening. So we do have that. We recognize we are people are still going hungry. We want to recover our riparian lands. We want to bring education from the lowest grade on all these matters. We want to bring sensitization. And Kenyans are all very open-minded. They are tired. They want a change. They want to move forward.
Okay, and just before we move on to the next topic, let me just circle back to my first question under this topic of the economy. I asked how you intend to bring down the cost of living within the first 100 days, but I also asked by how much? What can Kenyans expect from you? How much do you intend to bring down the cost of living?
I think that the most I can talk of is by what I will do. It's by what I will do.
So you don't have an answer to that?
It's what I will do. I believe as a nation now that even our annual budget should not be 3 trillion. If we did things right, if we preserved our public funds, if we put them to the use they should, our annual budget should be going up to 10, 20 trillions instead of 3 trillion. If we had done things right, we should not be, and we are not unthankful, we are thankful, just rejoicing that we have got 22 kilometers expressway. This nation will be full of expressway, hundreds of miles. So I am really talking of, if I can give an estimate from here, I can't remember what we have said, bringing the cost of living. I tell you what, even if out of my 20-30 trillion Kenya shillings, which I believe is both out there and wasted, we got 10 trillion. This nation will be flipped upside down. I read something this week in one of the dailies. It was in the Nation newspaper. Let me give credit to an our report. And they say that the current road network, which we understand infrastructure, 11,000 kilometers, that's what we built. We built it with 1.5 trillion. Look at what 1.5 trillion can do. What if you have 10? What if you have 15? What you have 20? Kenyans, I'm asking you to take a journey with me. Visualize, close your eye, and see a nation 59 years, what it should have been. The other nations we talk about, as I look at you, New York, London, Singapore would be looking up to Kenya. Okay. That's what I want to make Kenya to be.
Okay, and we can't end this topic before we talk about employment. It's a huge issue in the country right now, and a number of Kenyans are not employed, particularly those leaving school who are looking for jobs, and even the adult population. Some of them even above 40 years are not employed. And it says statistics also show that about 63% of Kenyans tonight will go to bed without a meal on the table. What is your plan for this group of people if you are elected president to create employment to this country? We've had promises of 1 million jobs a year, 800,000 jobs. What is the Agano plan for this?
Might I interject and ask also, how will you create more jobs in the formal sector?
Yes.
We have looked at that issue. It's close to our hearts. I feel you, I feel Kenyans, because things are bad out there. Things are real bad. We have said in our manifesto that we will endeavor to create employment at all levels. With the 2010 Constitution, we went devolvement. And one of the things we have said in our manifesto that when we bring our funds back, when we stop the siphoning, the 2 billion, when we arrest those people who have made it impossible for the government or the president to move forward, we will give from the national office 40% to the devolved units. And we have said out of that, that is far above even what, but that's above the 35 that BBI was promising. That even beyond that, we want to ensure that 50 million at least goes to the lowest unit of development, which is the village council. And there are people who would say, how would that happen? And what benefit will it have? For us, we devolved money. Unfortunately, we also devolved corruption, but we never devolved decision making. We are interested, we want Kenyans to decide what they want to do from the lowest unit, the mtaa, the village, the nyumba kumi. And why is this important? Because some part of the job creation will come from there. It is there they will decide we need a road to this area, we need to make a cattle dip if there are areas without. Is there they will decide that we need to have this milk processing. And out there, there are so many youth. It is down at that level where they know their needs are. So that is one way that we'll be able to do that. Secondly, we will be injecting money. I think the picture I would like to bring out to all Kenyans and those listening is, I am not just proposing things we'll do, but I am saying in my government we will have money, and that the money is somewhere. If the money we are talking about comes, we have talked about how we should be able even to give to the youth, to give to the workers, not less than 500 billion Kenya shillings. Because assume that money comes back, or even half of it, or even a quarter of it. Look at the wonders it can do. We've also talked about skills as being important. People need skills. We've talked about giving money to young people so that they can do startups. We've talked about getting rid of certain taxations so that Kenyans can be able to move forward. So we've talked again at bringing back cottage industries. And there's a sense in which they are coming back. Because like when I was growing up in my home area, I was born and grew up in Nakuru County, and in a small town known as Turi. I remember when I was very young, and that's many years, in the early 70s, there was this small place where they were building hooks, and they were exporting them. And I know the young people from the area. Okay. Then I was in primary school. I could see them proudly, because there was something in the neighborhood that they were doing. In my hometown also of Molo, we had things and concerns that were going on. We had, these last 20 years, we have had a potato industry. The last I heard about it, it hadn't started off. And I'm saying taking industries. So we have had what we are calling pesa mashinani, madaraka mashinani. Let decisions be made there. So we will inject money.
Okay.
We will inject goodwill.
A potential voter for you has a question for you. Let's take the question.
My name is James Monia, working in Nairobi. And this is my question to all candidates. How will your government support institutions that promote police reforms and professionalism within the police service, so that we don't have cases of police brutality and the cases of extrajudicial killings?
Do I go ahead?
Yes.
We will be a government of the rule of law. And I need to say that among the other things that have brought us down is impunity. And impunity is disregard of the law. Impunity is a situation where those who are in power are not brought into book. They seem to be above the law. And it's not like we don't have institutions. We will strengthen judiciary. We will strengthen our investigative units. We will pay them well. We've talked about that. We have, in our manifesto, we have talked about 12 covenants, and one of them is covenants with men and women in uniform. We will give them modern machinery. We will get them we will give them freedom to make decisions, you know, in the sense there will be no interference. We will strengthen the offices and other agencies, EACC, that deal with anti-corruption, asset recovery. So And in matters extrajudicial killing, will bring back the rule of law. It's because of impunity. You know, corruption comes with a lot of things. It comes with all those evils and ills. And we have seen a judiciary that's willing. We will give money into it so that it can have courts into every county, which has been one of its desires. I'm saying, when we are a nation with money, when we are mission, the sky is the limit to what we can do. But also when there is goodwill, which is what I'll be bringing from where I am, we should be able to stop all that extrajudicial killing, bring to book, indeed, even revisit those which have not been adjudged to date. And I'm grateful this week we saw the court just do something in the right direction, because we can't continue doing this. It's part of impunity, which my government will deal with.
All right. There's also a second question for you, Mr. Mwaure.
My name is Jacqueline Kagu. I'm a mental health advocate in Kenya. And I want both parties to explain what they have in store for mental health in this country, given that in mental health, Ministry of Health has allocated 0.3% to mental health, which is very little compared to what is in store for in matters mental health. And given that Mental Health Amendment Act 2022 is almost being signed by the president of this country.
Sorry, Ken, I missed a little bit of what she said.
Issues of mental health.
Mental health, yes.
Yes.
We can't ignore that mental health is here with us. It's with our brothers, it's with our sisters. It's with people very close to us. And that's why I think the suggestion, one of the reasons, the suggestion to introduce, to regularize the growing of bang in our nation, that's why I'm opposed to that. And I know you'll be asking more about that question. Mental health is sort of, I personally have had people close to me who have suffered from that. And we need to start tackling that. We need to come up. We have said a lot about in our covenant, Agano na Kenya kuhusu afya, concerning health. In our hospitals, this is something we will want to give a lot of attention to. Number one, we need to start tracing it from as early as primary school, if not high school, because one of the problems we've had is ignoring that mental health is real and it exists. Number two, we need to come up with what other countries have done. And other countries have come with means and ways and means, where there are even lines where you can call because you feel like taking your life the next 1 minute, and you get a counselor ready waiting for you. We need to come up with places that the government has oversight over. Right now, I'm not sure, I can't say 100% that the government has oversight over rehabilitation. I was checking the other day and it was not clear to me who licenses or how they should be licensed. I mean, and right now it's at very high level with the problems that we have to come. We will give enough money to our health sector. We've talked about at least a 5-level hospital in every county. And in it, we will demand that there be established a Department of Mental Health.
How much is enough money?
You know what we've been saying? We have 12 covenants with Kenyans. And we are saying to them, you know what, before the end of our first year, we see ourselves getting not less than 12 trillion back into this nation, more. And we have gone as much as saying, we are saying no to corruption, bring our money back, and we have even been had to say 1 trillion for every economic sector in Kenya. If we are not able to give 1 trillion, we are talking about half trillion. We have money in this nation. This is a wealthy nation.
Okay.
That's why we're able to lose 2 billion and we can't notice it. That's why 215 billion euro board is unaccounted for. It's nowhere. And nobody, the moment Auditor General Uhuru left, and after a few months, it's a forgotten business. It's not forgotten. We want to know where the Euroboard money went to.
All right, at this point, I would like to shift focus to our next topic, and that is on the issue of education. if you assume office in the next few weeks, perhaps, your biggest headache in the education sector will be as early as January, when 2.5 million students will have to transition into secondary school. How are you going to address this crisis of congestion? Because already secondary schools are congested.
I know I'll not be the first one to address it. I know there are studies, there are recommendations which have not been able to go into them. But first of all, we have talked about the fact that we introduce free education from Kenyans from the lowest unit to the highest unit. And remember, my government is different from the other. We are saying we will have the money because we are going for the money where it is.
Free education, basic education, is in the Constitution. It's enshrined.
Yes, but
primary
it's not
and secondary. Are you saying that you are also going to give university students free education?
We are talking also of university students. It's from the lowest to the highest. And that's something apparently I have found almost every...
How are you going to fund that if already our education sector
I am the only candidate who has a solution to where we'll get money to fund our economic. I am the only one. Look at my proposals. I'm the other one who is going for the juggler. And I'm not just that, I am saying we'll go even for the big fish. It doesn't matter who you are. If we have an abacha in this nation, we'll get money from that abacha. That's what we are saying. We are so serious on this matter. But to come back to your question, education is a problem at many levels. We've talked of free education. We've talked about consultation. Right now we have the CBC, and we know what a problem it is. And we will sit down with the stakeholders. We will consult. We will have to find ways, but I think we are going through the first period of the problem is the CBC. Like, they're overlapping.
My question is not about CBC. It is about the immediate problem that you're going to face, which is to find space for 2.5 million students in secondary school. You wouldn't have much time.
Because we have money, we'll find a way out.
So we'll have money by January?
Makeshift shelters, we'll have to do that. But I'll tell you what, I'll be taking a corrupt country, but I'll be coming in, both a corrupt and a broke country, but I'll be coming in with money. But I think there are no easy solutions, and I hear your concern. These are matters that we will have to see what we can do. And some of the possible solutions will be to look for ways, makeshift. We probably might have to go virtual in some form of education.
At the moment, you don't have a plan.
Not for that specific number, but we have a covenant with Kenyans on education. We will put money into it. We will discuss and improve the CBC, not doing away with it altogether. We have that. We have said we'll give free education. In terms of a specific like that, it may not, again, Manifesto can't contain everything. But we have to find ways. Everybody must go to school. If we have to do it virtually, we will have to go that way. If we have to turn some government offices, I don't know, I have not thought about it. Every Kenyan must go to school, must get a learning. It's a problem, I agree. But again, it's a problem we have inherited, and we have to find ways. As a president, I will not sit back. But with money, the sky will be the limit. You know what? Even classrooms, through fabricated materials, you can build classrooms in a matter of weeks, if not days.
You understand?
There will be money in my government.
You understand? I want to ask you more about education, but you understand even getting that money to Kenya, the money that you're targeting, must be an issue of legislation, must be an issue of the law.
You know, it's at two levels, Ken. I'm talking, first of all, of our money out there. But I'm also talking of wastage from here.
Okay.
Kenyans showed us in the year 2002 that we can stop corruption. And there was goodwill. Unfortunately, we did not move on and build on that. And when we came back in the current government, we have even gone back to way before the coalition government.
Okay.
I mean, I know because of the steps we are taking, even by waiving away 50% of pay, Kenyans will sit back. Kenyans love their nation. Kenyans know they have a great nation and say, why are we doing this? It's not right.
Okay, let me take you
government,
back.
an Agano government of Mwaure Wahiga is seeking to improve our lives. He wants to make us a first world. What we are doing is not right. And not only that, we will defend whistleblowers. Kenyans will talk. Kenyans will talk, come to the truth, and the Recovery Commission and tell what is happening.
I'd like to take you back now to CBC because you mentioned it in your statement. Parents, most parents are crying out and saying it's not working, it's very expensive for them. Some teachers also, including the Teachers Union, NAT and KUPE, took a stand on CBC earlier on. The only institution that took charge is the government, the national government, through the Ministry of Education, and the president, the outgoing president, has mentioned this. From where you stand, my first question is, would you continue with CBC? Would you rethink CBC if you were elected president, and why?
I would rethink CBC in the sense with a view to improving it. I have met parents as well, and I have family members who've got children who are in primary school. And admittedly, CBC has been very costly. Not only that, it's been very involving. But I've met parents from across both ends of the coin, some who have said, there is something good. And I agree because I passed through a bit of CBC. I went to school when we had subjects known as hard work, technical subjects, subjects known as agriculture, where we carried the hoe into school. And by the time I was grown up, there are things I could do for myself because I've been exposed to them. We will sit down with stakeholders and seek to improve it. It can be good for the future, but right now it's expensive, it's demanding. Kenyans don't have money. We can't continue like this. But again, we have said, this is one sector. Education is key. Kenya is where it is because Kenya values education. Kenyans are educated. We can't go back on this. Right now, we are into ICT, and we would like Kenya to be the country that's leading in those areas like other countries.
Okay.
So I have answered your question. We will think with a view to improving.
One of the biggest voting bloc that perhaps you're looking at as a presidential candidate is the teachers of this country. And the teachers of this country have had a very bad run, according to them, with the government, the outgoing government. And they're wondering today, would you guarantee their interests if you were elected president? And would you put NAT back, for example, to where it was probably 10 years ago?
Oh yeah. We have spoken about education. We've talked about increasing salaries to the men and women in uniform. We've talked about the welfare of the men and women in healthcare. I mean, part of the money that should have gone to meet the needs of these people, and they are very critical. I would want Kenyans to be proud to be teachers, to be educators like in other nations. I feel proud when I go home and I meet Mr. Opondo, who is now going to almost 100 years. I haven't seen him in quite a while, who was my primary school teacher, and he is still there. He made me who I am. I feel very proud to walk around and meet policemen who are doing a good day's job, but they are not paid well, they are housing, and so on. I am proud with the little security I've granted to meet young men who love their country, who are doing their job, who want to move forward. I'll take care of their welfare because I will have the money.
All right, we are almost out of time, but I want to bring a question to you about an issue related to health. If you assumed office in August and a few weeks later it was declared that monkeypox was in Kenya, monkeypox has been declared a global health emergency. What plans would you have in place to address this health crisis? And bear in mind, monkeypox would have come just a few days or weeks after you came into this office. Therefore, you wouldn't have had time to get that money from abroad that you keep referring to.
I think the first thing I would like to say with pleasure is that there will be no monkeypox billionaires in my government. And secondly, I'm waiting if the president doesn't do it before I come into power, just like he did with Unga, and I'm thankful to be the president who will announce, and not just announce who the KEMSA billionaires are, but get the money back from them. I appreciate it will not be easy, and it has been said it will not be easy. I'll seek to work with everybody. I'll seek to work with our friends in Kenya and outside, with the various agencies. We've got trained doctors. We have got we have Kenyans who listen and want to do what is right, so that I believe there are measures we'll be able to take that can prevent it escalating. But when it comes as an emergency, we have no choice. You have to get to the consolidated fund and elsewhere in the exchequer where we can get money and put it into that, because lives of Kenyans matter. We'll also be careful about who does what, who sources what drugs, who brings what drugs, because that's where we got the KEMSA billionaires. To date, none of my competitors, while they know, wish to tell us who they are.
So does your party have a plan to address a health crisis?
We have talked about increasing our hospitals. We've talked about taking care of the welfare of the doctors and the health workers. We've talked about, actually we have talked about something very unique. Just like we have a teachers' commission, we have talked about bringing back something that the health workers have been asking for, a health commission, which nobody has wanted to. Because it's important. We can't succeed on this war without involving them. They are the machinani of the health.
Before we
so
close, let me ask again, does your party have a plan to avert a health crisis?
We will just have to work with what we have.
So
we will call upon friends. I mean, I am not in government. I'm not like the Deputy President or the Right Honorable, who are both in government in one form or another. I mean, we'll just have to work with what we are. We will call upon friends, our neighbors. We will call upon all doctors. It will be a crisis. And we will ask Kenyans, this is where we are. We'll be transparent. And the international community we've seen it come to the aid of various nations. Kenya is a friend of many nations. Okay. We will get help. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Mr. David Wahiga Mwaure, thank you so much for coming to the debate tonight.
Thank you.
You have now 2 minutes to make your closing remarks.
Kenyans, you have heard me. I am told a number of you have already decided on who to vote for. But the question I want to ask, have those that you want to vote for made a difference in your life? I have told you the reasons why we are where we are. And yet those others, or my competitors, some who don't even want to come here and give you a minute of their time to tell you what they are talking about, to allow themselves to be interrogated, are saying they'll make a difference. Can they make that difference? I am saying to you, and don't you feel with me, that we are here because we have recycled leaders, and we are at a point where to move forward, we need to break some glass ceiling. I am telling you, I'm the real deal. There comes a time when hard decisions have to be made. Yes, I'm not part of them, and I've not been part of them. I'll come like the biblical David, of whom, as I said earlier, it's written, he shepherded Israel by the integrity of his heart and the skillfulness of his hands. I want to be that leader. I'm the real deal. Mimi ndiye nitabadilisha Kenya kabisa. Naomba kura zenyu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wahiga. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience and our viewers following this at home, we have to end it here for now. Our appreciation to Mr. David Wahiga of the Agano Party for honoring voters with this duty to a public televised national debate. Well, it was an interview. We thank you again.
And of course, it's not the end. The second presidential debate kicks off at 8 p.m. live from this same platform with my colleagues Yvonne Okwara of Citizen TV and Eric Latif of Spice FM and KTN News. We thank you for watching. My name is Ken Mijungu of KTN News.
And I am Smriti Vidyarthi of NTV. Good night.
All right, so the 90 minutes are done. David Wahiga Mwaure making his case in front of the Kenyan people. Of course, his opponent, Professor George Wajackoyah, who was expected to take that podium, the empty podium that you saw there, did not come for the debate. He sort of came and left. But here we are. We have listened to the Agano Party presidential candidate for the last 1.5 hours. And here with me, I still have my panel here. None of them has walked out. I need to emphasize because it looks like we've had a dramatic evening here. Dennis Kabara is still with us here, Professor Alex Awiti, Sheila Masinde, Wanjiro Gikonyo, and of course Houghton Irungu. Houghton, I'm a bit scared to give you the platform because the moment you start speaking, someone will arrive. But let's see. Maybe that's a good thing, huh?
Just give me 2 chances.
We'll give you 2 chances and we'll be set for the evening. But I wonder what you picked out from Mwaure's 90-minute in the limelight, as it were.
So I picked up 2 issues. I think the first issue I picked up was really this idea of a redemptive leadership, a leadership that is grounded in faith, not necessarily Christian faith, but values and ethical values at that. And that was something that was really important. I think, I was struck a little bit by the parallels between him and Lazarus Chakwera of Malawi,
yes,
who was elected after 24 years of being an Assemblies of God
Minister,
preacher.
yeah.
So that was the first thing that I got. And I think we have to recognize that religion is an extremely vibrant, thought-provoking force in the continent. And they're saying something like 2 out of every 5 Christians in the next 10-20 years will be in Africa, right? So we should expect more candidates to come forward to put themselves forward for leadership. Fact check.
All right, I told you, but it's not a candidate. It is the Agano Party presidential candidate is out there, and we just want to hear how he thought this went for him.
You're not lucky.
Thank you very much, Joe. He is outside here, just emerging from the debate. Your opponent, the man you were meant to engage on the podium, the Roots Party presidential candidate, Professor George Wajackoyah, failed or rather declined to take part in this debate. What do you make of that?
Well, I was very disappointed and doubly disappointed because I actually saw him driving, and I can't understand why he should come all the way here to say he will not participate. As leaders, we must allow ourselves to be interrogated. I feel a sense of freedom. I feel like I can fly because I have spoken to Kenyans. They have had an opportunity to ask me questions. It is important, Kenyans, you ask yourself, who can you depend on? Is every policy being proposed a policy that can work? Why don't we interrogate it in a place like this? I'm disappointed.
Do you feel you managed to achieve what you set out to achieve here this evening?
Yes, and I was surprised how time moved very quickly. And I feel elated because I was being honest. But also, it is important that leaders come out and they come out as they are before Kenyans. And they say why they are in this race. Let's stop giving promises out there. But let's also, when we come here, explain the past, what we do in the future, and what we have done in the past. And if you've been in government, why we are where we are. And for instance, some of the examples I gave explain where is the 215 billion euro board if you are in government when that money went missing.
Right, thank you so much. Well, Joe, the Agano Party presidential candidate just leaving, he says he is the real deal, very confident that this evening he got to clarify, he got to articulate the policies that he has for Kenyans if he wins the elections come August the 9th. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Rita Tinina. Just engaging the Agano presidential candidate moments after he left that stage in his own assessment. Actually, the real deal, those two words were his on that stage, and he believes that he has done a great job. And Houghton, you were actually doing an assessment on this end, and I do hope that this time around you can actually finish your thoughts.
Let's keep going. Maybe the candidates will rock up as a result. So I think the first point, he talked a lot about religious leaders having been an important part of the second liberation struggle, the first liberation struggle, and so on. He talked a bit about Bishop Okulu and Muge and others. I think there are a number, and they're not just Christian. I mean, I think we have to think about Sheikh Balala. We have to think about the Chief Justice Emeritus Willie Mutunga, a Muslim. We have to think about younger generation of people who are very grounded in their faith but come to give leadership. So I think that was interesting for me. The second point that I wanted to raise was the question that was raised about mental health, because I think I heard something interesting there that I think all the candidates could address themselves to. The first one is this. We know from the stats that something like 300 people are diagnosed with depression every day in Kenya. And that we are the fifth or sixth highest number of people who have mental health issues. Now, we've seen a new mental health bill come to pass. It was enacted just recently. This is the Senator Kasanga bill. We've also seen a lot of investment in mental health institutions, and I think now you can use your NHIF card for mental health treatment. But the question we have not discussed yet is the issue of disabilities, other disabilities. So, for example, people with disabilities, I'm told, are something like about 8% of the voter base in this country. So that's a population of about 1.7 million people. I've not heard a strong argument for what candidates would do with regards to the issue of people with disabilities. What we've seen is really a gerrymandering or a fixing of the nominations that should be going to people with disabilities. And did we not see something like 79 party lists rejected just recently because people were using spaces for minorities and exclude marginalized communities for others? And I think we need to see more focus on all of the disabilities in the electoral race in the last few weeks of the elections.
Thank you. And Professor Witi, Houghton talks about this contrast that Wahiga Mwaure was trying to draw between himself and the other three gentlemen who are running for president in the country. And he basically says that he is the real deal because all these other guys have been there, done that, and there's a sense in which every one of them, according to him at least, can be associated with the problems that we have. Do you think that that was a convincing case that he was making, and did he succeed at it?
I think he made a good point, which Irungu already referred to, and I characterize it as a pastoral approach, that he is a good shepherd. And that is deeply inherent in his faith tradition. And you could see in his presentation, he talked a lot about corruption, the debt, the cost of living, integrity, values. So he was spot on the real issues that we should actually focus on. What begs in my mind is whether the voters out there are listening to the contrast that he's trying to draw. Because I think he speaks from the heart. And I think the question that he was asked about his public service record was a really awkward question. Because again, the question is public service just working in government? Or is public service basically serving this country in all other places like private sector, private endeavors, like being a businessman or something like that? But he draws a very sharp contrast. Now the question he asks, which is pertinent, is all the other gentlemen coming to this stage have a public service record working in government, from Wajackoyah to Raila Odinga to William Ruto. I think the challenge that he's putting before them is, why are we here? Right. What difference are you going to make? You've been you've participated in government that has basically brought us to this mess. The debt crisis, runaway corruption, a country that is devoid of integrity and a sense of values. I think he raises the right questions. And today we might actually say that he's not actually the fifth, he's the real deal.
Dennis.
I think actually to add on to what he's saying, my sense is sincere. He came across very sincere. His manifesto, of course, talks about restitution, and he talked a lot about that. My overall sense, it's a bit like the Constitution. It's ahead of its time. He's ahead of his time. If you see what I mean? He talks about things that
I'm
our
curious
politics
about that.
is not...
What do you mean he's ahead of time? Where is he and where are we?
The things he stands for are ahead of where we are. Let me put it that way. The values that Alex was referring to, that Irungu was referring to, it's not where we are.
But I mean, that is interesting because I've heard people say that what we've had in this country is national decline, that we have this regression that has happened in this country, that if you talk to anybody, whether it is about public transport, whether it is health systems and all that, there are people who actually said things used to be better. So I'm wondering whether we have regressed, as people say, or we are yet to get to that place where he is, because I find that a very interesting.
My sense is, before the others, I think my sense is we have allowed standards to drop. Yeah. We have accepted falling standards, and he's basically saying this is the standard we should be at.
Wow, Sheila.
I like that this, do I call it an interview or a debate by himself?
Yeah.
That it started on the topic around values, ethics, morals. Because that's
music to your ears.
Oh, music to my ears. Yes, because it's something that we have really talked about for some time since we passed the Constitution. You know, what are the ethical and moral standards that need to be applied for those who are serving in public office? And because when you look at the picture now, when you look at the ballot papers right now, a lot of those names are people who are not fit to hold office because they've been accused of one offense or another.
That's an interesting distinction because you're talking about a different standard. Right now, in this country, the standard